Hello guys, welcome to Fictional Vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto possessed the mystic eyes of death perception in a world of gods. Naruto x Scáthach, Fate/Grand Order. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Death in my eyes. Naruto's head felt like someone had used it for target practice with exploding tags. His eyes burned as consciousness crawled back, bringing with it a wave of confusion that hit harder than any of Sakura's punches. What the hell happened? He groaned, pushing himself up from cold, damp grass. The last thing he remembered was fighting that Otsutsuki guy. There'd been a blinding flash, then, nothing. Naruto blinked, trying to clear his vision. Something was wrong. Really wrong. The world looked different. Like someone had drawn thin black lines over everything. They covered the trees, the ground, even the air itself seemed webbed with them. Genjutsu, he muttered, forming a seal. Release. Nothing changed. The lines remained. Kurama, you seeing this? Naruto asked internally, reaching for the familiar presence of the Ninetales. Silence. Kurama. More silence, but different this time. Not the angry silent treatment the fox sometimes gave him, but an empty void where his partner should be. Panic surged through him. Kurama. Nothing. It felt like someone had ripped out part of his soul. Damn it. Naruto slammed his fist into the ground, creating a small crater. At least his strength was still there. He took a deep breath and looked around. This definitely wasn't the battlefield he remembered. No craters, no signs of the massive chakra explosions that had torn up the landscape. Just an unfamiliar forest with a well-worn path nearby. And those damn lines everywhere. His eyes throbbed, and suddenly the lines intensified, becoming more vivid. One particular line on a nearby rock caught his attention. It pulled at him, like it wanted to be touched. Almost without thinking, Naruto reached out and traced his finger along the line. The rock split cleanly in two, falling apart as if it had been cut by the sharpest blade. What the? Naruto jumped back, staring at his finger. No chakra. He hadn't used any chakra at all. He tried again with a fallen branch, tracing one of the lines that crisscrossed it. Same result, it split perfectly along where he'd traced. Okay, that's new, he muttered. And kinda awesome. A distant scream interrupted his experimentation. Naruto's head snapped up, instincts kicking in. Another scream followed, then another. He didn't think, he moved. Sprinting down the path, he followed the sounds of panic until he reached the edge of a village. It was small, traditional-looking with wooden buildings and paper lanterns. Reminded him a bit of some of the older parts of Konoha. Except Konoha didn't usually have people running for their lives while lightning struck randomly from a clear sky. Help us. A woman clutched at Naruto's jacket as he entered the village. The Thunder God is angry again. Thunder God. Naruto gently moved her behind him. Get somewhere safe. I'll check it out. In the village center, a man floated several feet above the ground. Literally floated, surrounded by crackling electricity. He wore elaborate robes with lightning patterns and held a sword that sparked with every casual swing. Each time he pointed it, lightning struck exactly where he aimed, leaving charred holes in the ground and buildings. Is this the best entertainment you mortals can provide? The floating man called out, his voice booming unnaturally. Your fear was amusing the first dozen times, but now it grows tiresome. Another lightning bolt struck near a fleeing villager, close enough to send them sprawling but not directly hitting them. Like mice in a maze, the man sighed. Perhaps I should remove the exit this time. Naruto had seen enough. Hey! Thunder jerk. Pick on someone who can. Actually fight back. The floating man turned slowly, eyebrow raised with aristocratic disdain. A brave mouse appears. How novel. His eyes narrowed as he studied Naruto. You're not from these parts. Your garments, your manner of speech. Interesting. And you're attacking innocent people for fun, Naruto shot back. That ends now. The man laughed, the sound causing actual thunder to rumble overhead. You address Takamikazuchi, god of thunder and war, mortal. Know your place. God, huh? I've fought gods before, Naruto replied, dropping into a fighting stance. Didn't end well for them. It wasn't entirely a bluff. The Otsutsuki had basically been gods, and he'd held his own. Takamikazuchi's eyes flashed with annoyance. Your insolence requires correction. He pointed his sword casually, and lightning crashed down directly at Naruto. But Naruto wasn't there anymore. Basic substitution jutsu had him appearing behind a broken cart as the lightning struck his previous position. Too slow. Naruto called, already forming shadow clones. 5 Narutos surrounded Takamikazuchi, each preparing a Rasengan. The Thunder God looked genuinely surprised. Duplication magic? How unexpected. All 5 Narutos leapt at once. Takamikazuchi swung his sword in a wide arc, creating a ring of lightning that dispersed 4 of the clones instantly. The real Naruto, coming from above, managed to get closer before the god pointed upward, sending a lightning bolt through him. Except it wasn't him, another substitution, leaving a log to be incinerated instead. You're quick, Mouse, Takamikazuchi acknowledged, now scanning the area more carefully. But quickness alone won't save you. Naruto emerged from between 2 buildings, hurling wind-enhanced shuriken. They sliced through Takamikazuchi's electrical aura, nicking his robes before he could fully dodge. The god's expression darkened. You damaged my vestments. His voice lost all playfulness. No mortal has touched me in centuries. The sky above darkened instantly, unnatural storm clouds forming from nowhere. I was going to toy with you, Takamikazuchi growled, but now I'll simply erase you. Lightning began striking everywhere, no longer controlled but wild and furious. Villagers screamed as buildings caught fire. Naruto gritted his teeth, he needed to end this fast before people got hurt. He created 20 more clones, sending them in different directions to help villagers while preparing his counterattack. The real Naruto focused, feeling for natural energy. Without Kurama, he'd have to rely on Sage Mode. Except, nothing happened. No natural energy responded to his call. What the hell? Naruto tried again, desperately. Nothing. Whatever world this was, Sage Mode wasn't working either. A massive lightning bolt obliterated 3 of his clones at once, the shockwave sending debris flying. Naruto ducked behind a stone well as pieces of wood and tile rained down. No Kurama, no Sage Mode, he muttered. But I've still got chakra and... His eyes throbbed again, the strange lines suddenly becoming more visible, more intense. As he looked at Takamikazuchi, Naruto could see hundreds of lines covering the god's body, intersecting at various points. Are those weaknesses? Naruto wondered aloud. Only one way to find out. Creating another wave of clones as distraction, Naruto circled around, using the chaos to get closer. The Thunder God was focused on blasting the clones, not noticing the real Naruto approaching from behind. When he was close enough, Naruto leapt, kunai in hand. As he flew through the air, his eyes locked onto one particular line across Takamikazuchi's shoulder. It stood out among the others, practically pulsing. Takamikazuchi sensed him at the last second, turning with his sword raised, but too late. Naruto's kunai traced along the line on the god's shoulder. There was no resistance, the blade slid through as if cutting air. Blood, actual golden blood, spurted from the wound as Takamikazuchi let out a howl that shook the earth. The god's arm hung limp, partially severed where Naruto had traced the line. Impossible! Takamikazuchi roared, retreating upward in a flash of lightning. What are you? Naruto stood firm, as surprised as the god but hiding it better. Someone who doesn't like bullies, even if they call themselves gods. Golden blood dripped from above as Takumi Kazuchi clutched his wounded shoulder, shock and rage contorting his features. You cut me. A mortal wounded a god. Yeah, and I'll do worse if you don't leave these people alone, Naruto warned, raising his kunai again. His eyes still burned, the lines on everything still visible. Takumi Kazuchi's face shifted from rage to something else, fear. Actual fear in the eyes of a god. Those eyes, he whispered, now floating higher. Death in your eyes. What manner of abomination are you? Before Naruto could answer, thunder boomed and a blinding flash filled the village square. When Naruto could see again, Takumi Kazuchi was gone, leaving only a lingering smell of ozone and a few drops of golden blood on the ground. The villagers emerged slowly from their hiding places, staring at Naruto with expressions ranging from awe to terror. You drove away Takumi Kazuchi, an old man said, approaching cautiously. No one has ever done that. Naruto shrugged, suddenly aware of every eye on him. He was hurting people. I couldn't just watch. Your eyes, a child whispered, pointing. They're all weird. Naruto blinked, realizing his vision was still filled with the strange lines. He closed his eyes tightly, concentrating on making whatever this was stop. When he opened them again, the lines had faded to barely visible traces. The villagers seemed relieved. Thank you, stranger, the old man said, bowing deeply. Takumi Kazuchi has tormented our village for years. We've lost many to his games. Does he come here often? Naruto asked. Every few months, when boredom drives him from the heavenly court, a woman answered. He is but a minor god, they say, but still far beyond mortal power to oppose. Well, he bled, Naruto said. God or not, he can be hurt. The old man looked troubled. Perhaps, but wounding a god will have consequences. The heavens do not forgive such transgressions easily. I'll handle it, Naruto promised, though he had no idea how. For now, you should tend to the wounded and put out these fires. As the villagers dispersed to deal with the aftermath, Naruto slumped against the well, suddenly exhausted. His eyes had returned to normal, but the headache lingered. What the hell were those lines? How had he cut a self-proclaimed god so easily? And more importantly, where was he, and how could he get back home? You should leave before nightfall, the old man advised, returning with a small pack. Here's some food and water. The next village is half a day's walk north. Thanks, Naruto accepted the gifts gratefully. But why should I leave? Word travels fast when gods are involved, the old man said grimly. Some will seek to curry favor by capturing the one who wounded Takumi Kazuchi. Others. He hesitated. Others what? Others may seek you for different reasons. The old man glanced around nervously. There are those who would use one with your abilities for their own purposes. Story of my life, Naruto sighed, standing up. I don't suppose you know anything about these eyes or how I might have gotten here. The old man shook his head. I know only village matters and old tales. But if you seek knowledge of the strange and powerful, you might find answers in the capital city. The Imperial Library holds scrolls dating back to the age of creation. How far is that? 10 days' journey northeast. The old man pointed. Follow the river road. You can't miss it. Naruto nodded his thanks and turned to go, but paused when a young girl tugged at his jacket. Are you going to kill all the mean gods? She asked, eyes wide. Naruto knelt down to her level. I'm just trying to figure things out right now, but I won't let anyone hurt innocent people if I can help it. She nodded solemnly and pressed something into his hand, a simple charm made of twine and beads. For protection, she whispered before running back to her mother. Naruto smiled and pocketed the charm, then headed toward the village gate. Just as he reached the edge of the settlement, he felt a prickle at the back of his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. He spun around, scanning the area, but saw nothing obvious. Yet the feeling persisted. "Whoever you are," he called out, "I'm not looking for trouble, but I'm not afraid of it either." Silence answered him, but the feeling remained. With a final shrug, Naruto turned and continued down the path. Whatever, or whoever, was watching could make themselves known when they were ready. He had a capital city to find and answers to seek. From her perch atop the highest tree overlooking the village, Scáthach watched the strange yellow-haired warrior depart. Her crimson eyes narrowed with interest as she twirled a crimson spear idly between her fingers. "Takamikazuchi wounded by a mortal," she murmured to herself. And those eyes. She had seen them activate during the confrontation, the unmistakable blue tint, the way he had traced a death line on a god's body. The mystic eyes of death perception. She hadn't seen their like in centuries, and never so powerful as to affect a divine being. Scáthach had come investigating rumors of divine disturbances, expecting perhaps some minor skirmish between lesser supernatural entities. Instead, she'd found something far more intriguing, a human who could potentially kill immortals. A slow smile spread across her ageless face. For someone who had lived far too long, who had transcended humanity and found herself trapped in immortality, such a power was fascinating. "Naruto," she spoke his name, having heard the villagers call him that. "I believe we have much to discuss." With inhuman grace, she leapt from her perch, landing silently on the forest floor. She would follow him for now, observe him further. If he truly possessed what she thought he did, he would need guidance, and protection from those who would fear or exploit him. And perhaps he could offer something she had sought for countless years, a worthy death for one who had become too powerful to die by normal means. Scáthach moved like a shadow through the trees, easily keeping pace with her quarry while remaining undetected. This promised to be the most interesting development in centuries. Naruto walked for hours, the unfamiliar landscape passing in a blur as his mind raced. Every so often he'd try to connect with Kurama again, reaching inward only to find that hollow emptiness. It felt wrong, like missing a limb he'd always had. "Get it together," he muttered to himself. "You managed fine before you two became buddies." But that didn't make the fox's absence hurt any less. As daylight faded, he found a small clearing near the road and set up camp, if you could call unrolling a borrowed blanket under a tree setting up camp. Without his usual gear, he had to improvise. After a simple meal of the villagers' provisions, Naruto lay back and stared at the strange stars. They formed unfamiliar patterns. Even the moon looked different, slightly larger, with markings that didn't match the ones he knew. "Definitely not my world," he concluded with a sigh. He closed his eyes, concentrating on his chakra. It flowed normally through his pathways, responding to his call. Yet something felt off about it, like it was interacting with this world differently. Rasengan and clones worked fine, but Sage Mode didn't. Why? And those eyes, that power. Naruto opened his eyes, deliberately trying to activate whatever had happened during the fight. For a moment nothing changed, then his vision shifted. The lines appeared again, covering everything. They were beautiful in their complexity, a web of interconnected points and lines mapping out, what? Weakness? Death? "Death in your eyes," Takamikazuchi had said. Naruto focused on a small rock beside him. Dozens of lines crisscrossed it. He picked it up and traced one line with his finger. The rock split perfectly. He tried another line, and it split again. "Weird, but useful," he murmured. The constant visibility of the lines was straining, though. His head started to pound after just a few minutes. Naruto closed his eyes again, willing them to return to normal. When he reopened them, the lines had receded to faint traces he could barely detect. With a yawn, he settled down to sleep. Tomorrow he'd continue toward the capital city and hopefully find some answers. Just before drifting off, that feeling of being watched returned. This time, rather than calling out, Naruto simply pretended to fall asleep while remaining alert. Someone was definitely tracking him. Friend or foe, he couldn't tell, but they were skilled, he could barely sense their presence despite his heightened awareness. Guess I'll meet you eventually, he thought as genuine sleep finally claimed him. Takumi Kazuchi stormed through the divine halls, golden blood still seeping through the hasty bandages on his shoulder. Lesser gods and spirits scattered before his fury, whispering among themselves at the unprecedented sight of an injured deity. He burst into the grand chamber without announcement, interrupting a gathering of higher gods. Conversation halted as all eyes turned to him. Takumi Kazuchi, spoke a serene woman in flowing water-patterned robes, Mizuhame, goddess of sacred waters. Your presence was not requested at this council, and your state is, concerning. I was attacked. Takumi Kazuchi raged. Wounded by a mortal. Murmurs rippled through the assembled deities. A tall god with midnight black hair and piercing silver eyes, Tsukuyami, god of the moon, leaned forward. Explain yourself, Thunder Child, Tsukuyami commanded. No mortal possesses power to harm our kind. Takumi Kazuchi bristled at the diminutive title but knew better than to challenge one of the major gods. This was no ordinary mortal. He had eyes. Eyes that saw death in all things. He traced a line across my shoulder and my flesh parted like mist. The chamber went silent. An elderly god with a scholar's robes and a long, white beard stroked his chin thoughtfully. Death perception, Omoikane, god of wisdom, said. The mystic eyes that see the mortality inherent in all existence. I believe them mere legend, or at least extinct in this age. Legend or not, they wounded me. Takumi Kazuchi pointed to his injury. A god's blood was spilled by a human hand. Tsukuyami exchanged glances with the other major deities present. This is troubling. Where is this mortal now? I withdrew to report this blasphemy, Takumi Kazuchi said, avoiding the admission of retreat. You fled, Mizuhame observed with a slight smile. Prudent, if unprecedented. Takumi Kazuchi flushed with anger and embarrassment. I did not flee. I strategically, enough, Tsukuyami interrupted. The mortal's location? A village in the eastern provinces, Takumi Kazuchi replied. But he will not stay there. The villagers feared retribution and sent him away. Omoikane closed his eyes briefly. I sense a disturbance in the natural order. A foreign element has entered our realm, bringing imbalance. This mortal may be more than he appears. He must be destroyed, Takumi Kazuchi insisted. Such power cannot be permitted among humans. That decision is not yours to make, Tsukuyami reminded him coldly. We will observe this development before acting. Kagetsuna. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a figure stepped forward, a human man in dark armor with a face hidden behind a demon-like mask. He knelt before the assembled gods. My lord, Kagetsuna's voice was deep and steady. Find this mortal with the death eyes, Tsukuyami ordered. Observe him. Report his movements and abilities. Do not engage unless commanded. As you wish. Kagetsuna bowed lower, then vanished as silently as he had appeared. Takumi Kazuchi sputtered indignantly. Mere observation. This creature wounded a god. He should be eliminated immediately. Your reckless games with mortals have long tested our patience, Thunder Child, Mizuhame remarked. Perhaps this wound will teach the humility you sorely lack. Before Takumi Kazuchi could retort, Omoikane raised a hand for silence. There is more to consider here. If the mystic eyes of death perception have truly returned to the mortal realm, it may signify a greater shift in the cosmic balance. The boundaries between divine and mortal may be thinning. All the more reason to kill this human quickly, Takumi Kazuchi argued. Tsukuyami's expression darkened. You are dismissed, Takumi Kazuchi. Attend to your wound and speak of this to no one outside this chamber. The council will deliberate and decide what action to take. Recognizing the finality in the moon god's tone, Takamikazuchi had no choice but to bow stiffly and withdraw, seething with humiliation and resentment. After he left, Omoikane turned to the other major deities. The emergence of these eyes troubles me greatly. They are not merely weapons, they are cosmic counterbalances that appear when divine power grows too unchecked. You believe they herald something more significant? Mizuhame asked. I fear they may, Omoikane replied gravely. The last recorded appearance of the mystic eyes coincided with the near awakening of that which sleeps below. Several gods shifted uncomfortably at the reference. Izanami stirs. Tsukuyomi's usual composure faltered slightly. It is too soon to tell, Omoikane cautioned. But we would be wise to investigate thoroughly before taking action against this mortal. He may be a symptom rather than a cause. The divine council fell into troubled discussion as outside, the night grew darker and stars shifted imperceptibly in their ancient patterns. By midday of the following day, Naruto had covered significant ground. The road followed a winding river through increasingly populated areas. He passed farmers working in rice fields, merchants with loaded carts, and the occasional patrol of armored soldiers. The world seemed both familiar and alien. The architecture and clothing reminded him of some of the more traditional parts of the elemental nations, but subtle differences stood out. The writing on signs used characters he recognized mixed with ones he'd never seen. People's chakra signatures felt muted, almost non-existent in most cases. And everywhere, gods were part of daily life. Small shrines dotted the roadside. Travelers stopped to leave offerings or whisper prayers. Naruto overheard conversations about divine blessings, omens, and which deity governed what aspect of life. These people really take their gods seriously, he muttered to himself after passing a procession of white-robed priests. His stomach growled, reminding him that his provisions were running low. Ahead, a riverside market bustled with activity. Colorful stalls lined both sides of the road, selling everything from fresh fish to intricate pottery. Naruto reached for his frog wallet out of habit, then remembered, different world, different currency. He checked his pockets anyway and found several unfamiliar coins, presumably given by the villagers along with the food. Better than nothing, he shrugged, approaching a food stall selling dumplings. The transaction went smoothly enough, though the vendor gave him an odd look when he fumbled with the coins. Naruto sat by the riverbank, enjoying his meal and observing the busy market. You're not from around here, a voice stated. Naruto turned to find an old woman seated nearby, arranging flowers into complex patterns. Her eyes, milky with cataracts, somehow still seemed to focus directly on him. What gave me away? Naruto asked, popping another dumpling into his mouth. The woman smiled. You examine coins like they're foreign objects. Your accent is strange. And your chakra. She tilted her head. It blazes like a bonfire among candle flames. Naruto tensed. You can sense chakra. I was a shrine maiden in my youth, she explained. Some abilities remain, even in these old bones. You have the energy of one touched by higher powers. Higher powers, huh? Naruto laughed dryly. I think it's more like I got dropped here by accident. There are no accidents in the tapestry of fate, the woman replied, finishing her flower arrangement. You arrived exactly when and where you were meant to. Not big on the whole destiny thing, Naruto said. I make my own path. As you should, she agreed surprisingly. But paths converge and diverge by design sometimes. Yours has crossed into our world for a reason. Naruto hesitated, then asked, have you ever heard of eyes that can see death? Lines on everything that, when traced, cut through anything. The old woman went very still. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her flowers. The mystic eyes of death perception, she whispered. Not seen in generations. Some call them the god's doom. That's dramatic, Naruto said. But yeah, I think that's what I've got going on. Any idea how to control them? Or why I suddenly have them? Such eyes appear only at cosmic inflection points, she said, her voice now so quiet Naruto had to lean closer. When the balance between mortal and divine requires adjustment. I'm not really interested in adjusting any cosmic balance, Naruto pointed out. I just want to figure out how to get home. The woman reached out suddenly, grasping his wrist with surprising strength. Her cloudy eyes seemed to clear momentarily as she stared at him. Death and shadow will guide you, she intoned, her voice deeper than before. Seek the warrior queen who cannot die, yet yearns for death's embrace. Where shadows gather deepest, answers await. But beware the thunder's vengeance and the sleeping mother's awakening. Naruto pulled his arm back gently. That's specific. And kind of creepy. The woman blinked, and her eyes returned to their clouded state. She seemed confused. Did I say something strange, young man? My mind wanders sometimes. Before Naruto could respond, a commotion erupted in the marketplace. Shouts and screams drew his attention to a group of armored men pushing through the crowd. They wore distinctive black lacquered armor with lightning patterns, Takamikazuchi's emblem. We seek the foreign demon who attacked our divine lord, their leader announced. A yellow-haired outsider with blasphemous eyes. 10,000 gold pieces for information leading to his capture. The old woman gripped Naruto's sleeve. Go, she whispered urgently. Follow the river north past the fork. There's a hidden path through the bamboo grove. They won't find you there. Naruto hesitated. I didn't do anything wrong. He was attacking innocent people. Justice matters little when divine pride is wounded, she replied. Go now, while they search the south end. Making a snap decision, Naruto nodded his thanks and slipped away, using basic ninja stealth to avoid notice. He skirted the edge of the market and headed north along the riverbank, keeping to the shadows of overhanging trees. Behind him, he could hear the soldiers questioning people, their voices growing more frustrated with each negative answer. The villagers were protecting him, he realized, either out of gratitude for standing up to Takamikazuchi or fear of getting involved. Once he was safely past the market, Naruto picked up his pace. The fork in the river appeared after about 20 minutes of jogging, and he spotted the bamboo grove beyond it. Just as he was about to enter the thick stand of bamboo, movement caught his eye. A figure stood at the edge of the grove, a woman tall and regal in bearing, with crimson eyes and long purple hair. She wore a form-fitting bodysuit with armor pieces and carried a red spear that seemed to radiate dangerous energy even at a distance. Everything about her posture spoke of lethal capability and absolute confidence. Those red eyes locked onto his, and Naruto knew immediately, this was who had been watching him. Uzumaki Naruto, she called, her voice carrying clearly despite not being raised. I believe we have matters to discuss. Naruto stopped, sizing her up. She wasn't with Takamikazuchi's men, her armor bore no lightning emblems. And if she'd wanted to attack him, she'd had plenty of opportunities while he slept. How do you know my name? He asked, approaching cautiously. I've been observing you since your confrontation with the Thunder God, she answered simply. Your power interests me. You're the one who's been following me, Naruto stated. Pretty creepy, you know. A slight smile curved her lips. Caution, not creepiness. I needed to confirm what I witnessed. And what exactly did you witness? Naruto crossed his arms. The mystic eyes of death perception wounding a god, she replied. A power I haven't seen wielded in centuries. Naruto's eyebrows shot up. Centuries? You don't look that old. Appearances can be deceiving, she said. I am Scáthach, queen of the land of shadows, teacher of heroes, warrior of the gap between realms. She spoke without arrogance, stating facts rather than boasting. Something about her presence made Naruto believe every word. Those soldiers will be here soon, Scáthach continued. You can flee and likely be caught eventually, or you can come with me to my realm where they cannot follow. There, I can help you understand your eyes and perhaps find a way to return you home. And why would you help me? Naruto asked skeptically. Scáthach's crimson gaze intensified. Because your abilities fascinate me. Because the cosmic balance shifts and I would know why. And because. She paused, something vulnerable flickering across her face before vanishing. Because those with the power to kill immortals are exceedingly rare, and I have lived far too long. Naruto studied her, sensing the weight of truth in her words along with something left unspoken. Before he could decide, shouts came from downstream. Takamikazuchi's soldiers had picked up his trail. Time grows short, Scáthach noted calmly. What will it be, Naruto? Trust me, or take your chances with those who serve a vengeful god. Naruto glanced back at the approaching soldiers, then at the mysterious warrior queen before him. His instincts had rarely led him wrong. Lead the way, he decided. But if this is a trap, I'm not going down easily. Scáthach's smile widened slightly. I would expect nothing less. She turned and moved into the bamboo with liquid grace. Stay close. The path to the Shadowlands is not for the unwary. Naruto followed, leaving the sounds of pursuit behind as they entered the strangely dark heart of the bamboo grove. With each step, the world around them seemed to grow dimmer, the boundaries between light and shadow blurring. What exactly is the Land of Shadows? Naruto asked as they moved deeper into the increasingly unnatural darkness. A realm between realms, Scáthach replied without slowing. Neither fully in the world of the living nor the world of the dead. A place where I have ruled and trained heroes since time immemorial. And you can help me get home from there? Scáthach glanced back at him, her crimson eyes almost glowing in the deepening shadows. Perhaps. At the very least, I can help you survive long enough to find a way. The bamboo around them had changed, growing impossibly tall and wide, their green color leached away to ghostly white. The ground beneath their feet no longer felt solid, more like walking on packed fog than earth. We approach the boundary, Scáthach announced. Once we cross, we cannot return by the same path. Are you certain? Naruto looked behind them. The way they had come was now obscured by mist and shadow, the sounds of pursuit long faded. Ahead lay only deeper darkness and uncertainty. But with Takamikazuchi's forces hunting him and no clear way home yet, his options were limited. I'm sure, he said firmly. Let's go. Scáthach nodded once, then thrust her crimson spear into what appeared to be empty air. Reality tore open like fabric, creating a rift of absolute darkness. Without hesitation, she stepped through, gesturing for Naruto to follow. Taking a deep breath, Naruto stepped into the void. For a moment, cold nothingness surrounded him, a sensation of falling without movement. Then his foot touched solid ground again, and he found himself in a world of perpetual twilight. A massive fortress of dark stone rose before them, perched atop a craggy mountain. The sky above was a strange purplish black, neither night nor day but something in between. Misty plains stretched into the distance, dotted with what looked like ancient battlefields and training grounds. Welcome to the Land of Shadows, Scáthach said, her voice echoing slightly in the strange acoustics of this realm. My domain, and now your sanctuary. Naruto gazed around at the alien landscape, absorbing the otherworldly feel of it all. Nice place you got here. Very, gloomy. Scáthach actually chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm from someone so intimidating. It suits its purpose. Come, we have much to discuss, and your training should begin soon if you are to survive what comes next. Training? Naruto perked up despite himself. What kind of training? The kind that will help you master those eyes before they consume you, she replied, already striding toward the fortress. And perhaps teach you to fight gods without relying solely on them. Naruto hurried to keep up with her long strides. I've fought plenty of powerful enemies before. I don't need, you needed to retreat. From Takamikazuchi. After one lucky strike, Scáthach interrupted bluntly. And he is among the weakest of the true gods. What will you do when Tsukuyomi or Amaterasu comes for you? Or worse? There are worse gods than those? Naruto asked, surprised. Scáthach's expression grew grave. There are beings that make gods seem as insignificant as insects. And your arrival with those eyes may have stirred waters better left undisturbed. Great. Just great. Naruto sighed heavily. Somehow, he always ended up in these situations, strange new powers, ancient threats, the fate of worlds potentially hanging in the balance. Just once, he muttered as they approached the looming gates of Scáthach's fortress, I'd like to have a normal day. Scáthach glanced at him with that same slight smile. Normal is overrated. Now come, we begin with understanding what those eyes truly are, and why they have chosen you as their bearer. The massive gates swung open on silent hinges, revealing a courtyard where shadowy figures trained with weapons in eerie silence. They paused as Scáthach entered, bowing deeply to their queen. Prepare the western tower, she commanded one of them. Our guest will be staying indefinitely. The figure nodded and vanished like smoke. Naruto followed Scáthach into the heart of her domain, unable to shake the feeling that he was walking a path from which there would be no simple return. But then, simple had never really been his style anyway. In the depths of the Imperial Library, ancient scrolls trembled on their shelves. Dust that had lain undisturbed for millennia rose in tiny spirals as something shifted deep below the foundations. The lone knight attendant, an old scholar who had served the library for decades, felt a chill crawl up his spine. The lantern in his hand flickered despite the absence of wind. He paused in his rounds, listening. Silence, yet not silence. A faint sound like distant breathing came from everywhere and nowhere. Slowly, with trembling hands, the scholar approached the sealed section, the forbidden archives where texts of the primordial age were kept under imperial decree. The massive iron lock that had secured those doors for generations had fallen to the floor, the metal corroded as if subjected to centuries of decay in mere moments. The doors stood slightly ajar. The scholar should have called for guards, should have reported this breach immediately. Instead, some compulsion drew him forward. He pushed the ancient door wider and lifted his lantern. Inside, scrolls and tablets lay scattered, as if searched by invisible hands. At the center of the room, a stone pedestal stood empty, the dust around it disturbed in a perfect circle. The scholar's eyes widened in recognition and horror. He backed away, his mouth opening to scream, but shadow engulfed him before any sound could emerge. When the lantern hit the floor, its light revealed an empty room, the scholar nowhere to be seen. On the floor where he had stood, a single character had been burned into the stone, Mother. In the land of shadows, Naruto jerked awake from his first night's sleep, cold sweat covering his body. The dream, a library, darkness, fear, faded quickly, leaving only a lingering sense of dread. Outside his window, the perpetual twilight of Scáthach's realm gave no indication of time. But somehow, he knew, something had changed in the world he'd just left. Something had awakened. And somehow, he was connected to it. Chapter 2, Shadows and Lines, Again. Naruto groaned as he picked himself up from the stone floor of Scáthach's training arena for what felt like the 100th time that morning. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. You know, most teachers start with the basics, he grumbled, wiping blood from his split lip. Scáthach twirled her crimson spear, Gi-Balg, she'd called it, with casual grace. I am not most teachers. And we don't have time for traditional progression. It's been 3 days of you kicking my ass. How is that training? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You rely too heavily on your previous abilities. The shadow clones. The spiraling energy attack. They won't be enough against divine enemies. They worked fine against Kaguya, Naruto muttered. Who? Never mind. He rolled his shoulders and dropped back into a fighting stance. Let's go again. This time, Naruto watched her movements more carefully. Scáthach moved like water, fluid, relentless, finding every opening. But there was a pattern to her attacks. 3 quick strikes, then a momentary reset of position. If he could time it right. As expected, she came at him with lightning speed, her spear a crimson blur. 1, 2, 3 strikes, Naruto blocked the first 2 and narrowly dodged the third. Then, instead of retreating, he surged forward during that split-second pause. His fist almost connected with her ribs before she twisted away, but even that near hit was progress. Her eyebrow raised slightly, the closest thing to approval he'd seen yet. Better, she acknowledged. But still too slow. Without warning, she swept his legs out from under him. Naruto hit the ground hard, air rushing from his lungs. Damn it, he coughed, frustration boiling over. This is pointless. I need to learn how to control these eyes, not get beat up all day. Something shifted in Scáthach's expression. She planted her spear in the ground and crossed her arms. Very well. Activate them. Naruto blinked. What? Your eyes. Activate them now. He sat up, puzzled by the sudden change. I don't even know how. They just happen sometimes. Precisely the problem. Scáthach knelt before him, crimson eyes intense. The mystic eyes of death perception are not a technique to be mastered like your ninja arts. They are perception itself, a fundamental shift in how you see reality. That doesn't help me turn them on and off. Focus, she instructed. Close your eyes. Imagine peeling back the surface of the world to see what lies beneath. Naruto closed his eyes, feeling slightly ridiculous. But he tried to follow her instructions, visualizing the world's surface as a thin membrane he could see through. The lines you see are not weaknesses, Scáthach continued, her voice taking on a teaching cadence. They are death itself, the inherent mortality woven into all existence. Every object, being, even concept has an end point written into its creation. Even gods. Naruto asked, eyes still closed. Especially gods, she replied. Their immortality is often more conceptual than absolute. They simply exist on a different scale of time and power. And you? Do you have death lines too? A pause. Yes. Though mine are complicated. Something in her tone made Naruto open his eyes. For a moment, he thought he saw vulnerability in her face before her usual composed expression returned. Try again, she instructed. But this time, don't force it. Accept that death is part of all things, including yourself. Naruto closed his eyes once more. Accept death as part of everything. It reminded him strangely of accepting natural energy for Sage Mode, not forcing it, but becoming one with it. He relaxed, letting go of his resistance. When he opened his eyes, the world had changed. The lines appeared everywhere, thin black traceries covering everything in his vision. But this time, instead of causing pain, they simply existed as an overlay to normal sight. I see them, he said quietly. All of them. Scáthach nodded. Now look at me. Naruto turned his gaze to her. Lines covered her body too, but they were strange, fractured, disconnected in places, almost like a broken spiderweb. Your lines are different, he observed. Broken. The curse of immortality, she said simply. I cannot die a natural death, yet death itself remains written in my existence. A contradiction. Naruto reached out instinctively, his finger stopping just short of tracing a line across her forearm. If I touched one, it would wound me, perhaps severely. Her voice remained steady. But my complete death would require finding and cutting my point of origin, the nexus where all lines converge. Naruto pulled his hand back, uncomfortable with how casually she discussed her own potential death. I'm not interested in killing you. Something like disappointment flickered in her eyes. Perhaps not yet. But the option may provide comfort someday. Before Naruto could question that disturbing statement, his vision began to swim, headache building behind his eyes. He grimaced, shutting them tightly. The strain begins, Scáthach observed. This is your current limitation. Your mind cannot sustain the perception for long without damage. Great, Naruto muttered through gritted teeth. So they work, but they'll fry my brain. For now. She stood, retrieving her spear. With training, you will extend your endurance. The eyes chose you for a reason, your capacity to wield them must be greater than most. They chose me. Naruto opened his eyes, relieved to find his vision back to normal. I thought this was some weird side effect of getting dumped in your world. The mystic eyes of death perception are not random accidents, Scáthach explained. They manifest in individuals during times of cosmic significance, often as counterbalances to unchecked divine power. There's that cosmic balance thing again, Naruto sighed. An old lady in the market said something similar. Scáthach's interest sharpened. What exactly did she say? Naruto recalled the strange encounter. Something about seeking the warrior queen who cannot die yet yearns for death's embrace. That's you, I'm guessing. For once, Scáthach looked genuinely surprised. Those are the words of prophecy. Who was this woman? Just an old flower seller. But she got weird for a minute, like someone else was talking through her. A vessel for divine message, Scáthach murmured. What else did she say? Something about the thunder's vengeance and the sleeping mother's awakening. Not exactly helpful. Scáthach went very still. The sleeping mother, she repeated. Are you certain those were her words? Yeah. Why? Who's the sleeping mother? Instead of answering, Scáthach turned abruptly. We must accelerate your training. And we need information, more than what my library contains. I thought that's what we've been doing for 3 days, Naruto called after her as she strode toward the fortress. Hey! Who's the sleeping mother? She stopped, turning slightly. A name best not spoken casually. If what I suspect is true, your arrival here is far more significant than a random dimensional accident. Great, Naruto muttered, jogging to catch up. Another chosen one situation. Just what I needed. Over the following week, training intensified dramatically. Mornings were spent conditioning Naruto's body, sparring, weapons training, and exhausting exercises that pushed him to his limits even without Kurama's enhanced stamina. Afternoons focused on his eyes. Scáthach taught him to activate them at will, to control how much he perceived at once, and to identify the most critical lines on a target. She brought objects for him to practice on, gradually increasing in complexity. Why can't I just trace any line? Naruto asked on the 5th day, examining a metal shield covered in death lines. They all work. Efficiency, Scáthach replied. Some lines merely damage, others destroy completely. Some require more energy to trace, others less. In battle, such distinctions matter. She was right, of course. When Naruto focused more intently, he could see differences in the lines, some thicker, some pulsing subtly, others barely visible. When he traced the different types, the effects varied from small cracks to complete disintegration. Evenings were spent in Scáthach's vast library, searching ancient texts for references to the mystic eyes and their previous wielders. Most accounts were fragmented legends or vague warnings. There's not much concrete information, Naruto complained, closing another dust-covered tome. Just stories about death seers who could kill anything and were either revered or hunted down. Knowledge of such power is often deliberately obscured, Scáthach said without looking up from her own reading. Those who possessed the eyes rarely lived long enough to document their experiences. Comforting, Naruto muttered. Did you know any of them? The previous eye-bearers? Scáthach hesitated, then set down her scroll. 1. A woman named Keed, nearly 4 centuries ago. She appeared at my fortress much as you did, seeking sanctuary. What happened to her? She used her power to slay a minor deity who had been terrorizing her village, Scáthach said quietly. The divine courts responded, forcefully. They killed her. Eventually. Something dark crossed Scáthach's face. After months of questioning, the implication hung heavy in the air. Naruto swallowed hard. Is that why you brought me here? To protect me from that? Partially, she admitted. But Kiid's eyes were far weaker than yours. She could not perceive death in truly immortal beings, only lesser spirits and demigods. You wounded Takamikazuchi, a full deity. That makes you unprecedented. Lucky me, Naruto sighed. So what's our next move? Scáthach rolled up the scroll she'd been studying. We need more information than my library contains. Tomorrow, we leave for the Imperial Archives. Back in the regular world. Won't Takamikazuchi's goons be looking for me? Undoubtedly, she agreed. But the archives contain the most comprehensive collection of texts from the Age of Creation. If answers exist about your eyes and their purpose, we'll find them there. Naruto nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering him all week. You still haven't told me who the sleeping mother is. Scáthach's expression grew grave. Izanami no Mikoto. The primordial goddess of creation and death. Mother of gods and monsters alike. And she's sleeping. Sealed away, Scáthach corrected. After attempting to collapse the boundaries between life and death, she was imprisoned in Yomi, the underworld, by her divine husband and children. What does she have to do with me? Perhaps nothing, Scáthach said, though her tone suggested otherwise. But the mystic eyes often appear when cosmic balances shift. If Izanami's bonds are weakening. She didn't need to finish. Naruto got the picture, world-ending bad news. So we go to these archives, find out more about my eyes, maybe how I get home, and hopefully figure out if this Izanami situation is connected, he summarized. Correct. Scáthach stood. Rest well tonight. The journey will be dangerous. Takamikazuchi is not the only deity aware of your existence now. How many are we talking about? The divine courts are complex. Political entities, she explained. Some gods will fear you, others may see you as a useful tool, and a few might even view you as necessary correction to cosmic imbalance. Politics, Naruto groaned. I hate politics. Scáthach's lips curved in a rare smile. Says the boy who wanted to become Hokage. Naruto stared at her. How do you know that? You talk in your sleep, she said simply, turning to leave. Quite informative, actually. Naruto felt his face heat as she walked away. What else had he said in his sleep? Before he could ask, she stopped at the doorway. We depart at dawn, she said without turning. Be ready. Morning in the land of shadows looked much like evening, perpetual twilight casting everything in muted purples and grays. Naruto met Scáthach at the fortress gates, dressed in new clothing she had provided, dark pants and a fitted jacket with light armor pieces similar to her own style. The fabric is woven with shadow essence, she explained as they set out across the misty plains. It provides some protection against divine sight. They can just see me. From anywhere? Naruto asked. Major gods can sense significant disruptions in the natural order, she clarified. You, with your foreign chakra and death eyes, are exactly that. They traveled for hours across the shifting landscape of Scáthach's realm. Sometimes the ground beneath them seemed solid, other times like walking on dense fog. Occasionally, shadowy figures watched their passage, other inhabitants of this strange world. Are they all your students? Naruto asked, nodding toward a group of spectral warriors training with phantom weapons. Some were, she replied. Others are souls caught between worlds, neither alive enough for the mortal realm nor dead enough for the afterlife. That sounds lonely. Scáthach gave him a measured look. It is what it is. The land of shadows exists in the gaps between realms. Those who dwell here adapt or perish. How long have you been here? Naruto asked carefully. Longer than most civilizations have existed, she said without emotion. I was once mortal, a warrior queen and teacher of heroes. Time and circumstance changed that. And you can't leave? Ever. I can visit the mortal realm briefly, as you saw. But my essence is bound to this place now. I am its ruler and its prisoner. No wonder she'd been interested in his death-seeing eyes, Naruto realized. After countless centuries trapped in twilight, perhaps death seemed like freedom. They continued in silence until reaching what appeared to be the edge of a vast cliff. Beyond it stretched emptiness, not darkness, but a complete absence of anything. The boundary, Scáthach announced. Beyond lies the gap between realms. We must cross to reach the mortal world. How exactly do we cross? Nothing? Naruto asked skeptically. In answer, Scáthach raised her hand. Darkness gathered around her fingers, solidifying into what looked like a small bone key. With the appropriate tools. She turned the key in midair. Reality split open along an invisible seam, creating a doorway of swirling shadows. Through it, Naruto could see sunlight and trees. This will place us near the Imperial City, Scáthach explained. From there, we proceed cautiously. Your presence will attract attention, especially from divine servants. I know how to be stealthy, Naruto assured her. Scáthach's expression suggested doubt, but she merely gestured toward the portal. After you, then. Naruto stepped through and immediately squinted against bright sunlight. After days in perpetual twilight, even morning sun felt blinding. They had emerged in a bamboo grove similar to the one where he'd first met Scáthach, but the vegetation here was lusher, the air warmer. Scáthach followed, the portal closing behind her with a sound like exhaling breath. Immediately, she seemed more substantial, her features sharper in the natural light. This way, she directed, setting off through the bamboo. The Imperial City lies beyond that ridge. They traveled quickly but cautiously, keeping to forest paths and avoiding the main road. By midday, they crested a hill that offered their first view of the capital. Naruto whistled appreciatively. The city sprawled across a wide valley, centered around a massive palace complex. High walls surrounded both the inner palace and the outer city. Buildings of white stone and red-tiled roofs created a mosaic pattern, intersected by canals and wide avenues. Even from this distance, the streets teemed with activity. Pretty impressive, he acknowledged. The seat of mortal authority in this realm, Scáthach said. Though the emperor himself is considered semi-divine, a descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. So even their ruler is part god. No wonder they take all this divine stuff so seriously. Gods walk among mortals here, Scáthach reminded him. Faith is not abstract but practical when deities might visit your shop or destroy your city on a whim. As they descended toward the city, Scáthach outlined their plan. They would enter separately, Naruto disguised as a common traveler, she as a noble lady visiting the archives for scholarly purposes. They would meet inside once Naruto had slipped past the guards. The archives are restricted to scholars, nobles, and clergy, she explained. Your infiltration skills will be necessary. No problem, Naruto grinned. Sneaking into restricted places is basically my specialty. They parted at a crossroads near the city's eastern gate. Scáthach continued on the main road while Naruto circled around toward a less monitored section of the wall. Before they separated, she gripped his shoulder. Be vigilant, she warned. Divine agents may appear mortal but carry celestial energy. Trust no one. Not even you. Naruto half-joked. Her crimson eyes held his for a moment longer than necessary. I have my own reasons for helping you. Never forget that. With that cryptic reminder, she turned and walked away, her appearance subtly shifting. Her warrior's attire transformed into elegant robes, her distinctive spear becoming an ornate walking stick. Even her bearing changed, still regal but less predatory. Naruto watched her go, wondering not for the first time what her true agenda might be. Then he shook off the thought and focused on his own task. Getting into the city proved simple enough. The wall section he'd chosen was under repair, scaffolding providing easy access for a ninja with his skills. Blending with workers and then slipping into a busy market street, he became just another face in the crowd. The Imperial Archives were housed in a sprawling complex adjacent to the palace, a series of interconnected buildings with distinctive green-tiled roofs. Guards stood at the main entrance, checking credentials of all who entered. Naruto circled the perimeter, looking for alternatives. A delivery entrance on the eastern side offered possibilities. Servants carried crates of supplies and maintenance materials inside with minimal security checks. Naruto created a shadow clone transformed to look like an older worker, then transformed himself to match. Together, they lifted an abandoned crate and approached the entrance with purposeful steps. New scrolls for the Eastern Hall, his clone announced to the board guard. The guard waved them through without a second glance. Inside, Naruto dismissed his clone in a secluded corner and dropped his transformation. Now he just needed to find Scáthach. The archive complex was enormous, a labyrinth of reading rooms, scroll repositories, and document storage chambers. Scholars in distinctive blue robes moved through the halls, examining texts or engaged in quiet discussion. Naruto avoided them, moving with casual confidence as if he belonged. After several minutes of searching, he spotted Scáthach in a central reading room. She sat at a table surrounded by scrolls, the picture of scholarly concentration. No one would connect this elegant noble lady with the fearsome warrior queen of the Shadowlands. Naruto approached casually, sliding into a seat across from her. "Fancy meeting you here," he murmured. She didn't look up from her scroll. "You're late." "Got distracted by the architecture," he replied glibly. "So what exactly are we looking for?" "Records from the Age of Creation," she said quietly. "Specifically, accounts of the sealing of Izanami and any mention of the mystic eyes as cosmic counterbalance." "And where do we find those?" "The restricted section." She finally looked up, her crimson eyes meeting his. "The truly ancient texts are kept separate, available only to the highest imperial scholars." "Let me guess, we're breaking in." "After nightfall," she confirmed. "For now, we research what we can access openly. Focus on collections about divine manifestations and cosmic irregularities." They spent the remainder of the day sifting through accessible texts, finding scattered references to the mystic eyes but nothing substantial. As closing time approached, scholars and visitors began filing out. Scáthach slipped a scroll to Naruto. "A map of the archives," she whispered. "Memorize it." The document showed the layout of the entire complex, including the restricted section in the northeastern corner. A series of markings indicated guard positions and patrol patterns. "How did you get this?" Naruto asked, impressed. "I visited these archives 8 centuries ago," she replied simply. "Some things change, but the fundamental design remains." As the final call for departure came, they separated again. Scáthach left with the other visitors while Naruto slipped away, finding a secluded storage room to hide until nightfall. He settled behind a stack of crates, reviewing the map in his mind and waiting. Hours passed. The archive fell silent except for occasional patrol footsteps. When the midnight bell rang from a distant tower, Naruto emerged from his hiding place and moved silently through the darkened halls. Following the memorized route, he avoided 2 guard patrols before reaching the meeting point near the restricted section entrance, a small antechamber with a decorative fountain. Scáthach was already there, once again in her warrior attire. "The door is sealed with both physical locks and divine wards," she informed him. "Breaking them directly would alert the palace guardians." "So how do we get in?" "We don't break in," she clarified. We convinced the guardian to let us enter. Guardian? What guardian? As if in answer, the air before the restricted section's ornate door shimmered. A figure materialized, a small elderly man with an impossibly long white beard and scholarly robes. His eyes, however, glowed with inner light. Scáthach of the shadows, the figure spoke, his voice echoing strangely. It has been 3 centuries, I believe. 2.5, she corrected. You're looking well, Omoikane. Naruto blinked in surprise. You know each other? Omoikane is the god of wisdom and knowledge, Scáthach explained. Guardian of secrets too dangerous for casual access. The diminutive god turned his glowing gaze to Naruto. And you bring the death-eyed one to my door. Interesting choice, Shadow Queen. We seek information, not conflict, Scáthach stated formally. Information has a price, Omoikane replied. Especially information about cosmic irregularities and sealed primordials. You know why we're here, Naruto observed. I am wisdom itself, young one. Little escapes my notice. The god stroked his beard thoughtfully. Particularly when it involves eyes that can perceive the death of immortals and the stirring of ancient powers. Will you grant us access? Scáthach asked directly. That depends on what you offer in exchange. Omoikane's gaze fixed on Naruto. Knowledge is balanced by knowledge. I propose a trade. I will allow you entry if you answer 3 questions truthfully. What kind of questions? Naruto asked suspiciously. Questions that only you could answer, the god replied cryptically. About the world you come from, the power you contained, and the path that brought you here. Naruto glanced at Scáthach, who gave a slight nod. Fine, he agreed. 3 questions, then we get access. Excellent. Omoikane's eyes brightened. First question, what was the name of the entity sealed within you in your world? Naruto tensed. How did he know about Kurama? Kurama, he answered reluctantly. The 9-tailed fox. Omoikane nodded, seemingly pleased. Second question, what was the name of the goddess you faced before arriving in our realm? Kagaya Otsutsuki, Naruto replied. Though she wasn't exactly a goddess where I come from. More like an alien chakra parasite with godlike powers. Fascinating distinction, the god murmured. Final question, and consider carefully, why do you think the mystic eyes of death perception manifested in you specifically? Naruto frowned. How would I know? I just woke up with them after getting dumped in your world. That is not an answer, but an evasion, Omoikane chided. Look deeper. Why you, Uzumaki Naruto? What makes you the vessel for such power? Naruto fell silent, genuinely considering the question. Why him? What made him different from any other random person who might have been dropped into this world? I've faced death a lot, he began slowly. But I've always fought against it, for myself and others. Maybe. He paused, an insight forming. Maybe it's because I understand what it means to protect life that I can see the lines of death. The two are connected, you can't truly value one without understanding the other. Omoikane's expression shifted, approval evident. A worthy answer. The balance of wisdom is satisfied. The god raised his hand, and the elaborate door to the restricted section swung open silently. You may enter and seek what you came for, he announced. But heed my warning, knowledge uncovered cannot be reburied. Some truths change those who learn them. We understand the risk, Scáthach replied. Omoikane began to fade. One final courtesy, death-eyed one, Takamikazuchi approaches the city with divine allies. Your presence has not gone unnoticed. Whatever you seek, find it quickly. With that, the god vanished completely, leaving the door open before them. That was, surprisingly easy, Naruto remarked. Omoikane values knowledge and its exchange, Scáthach explained as they entered. He cares little for divine politics or retribution. But his warning is genuine, we have limited time. The restricted section was smaller than Naruto expected, a circular chamber with shelves lining the walls and a central pedestal. Ancient scrolls, stone tablets, and bound volumes filled the shelves, all emanating a subtle energy he could feel even without activating his eyes. "Where do we start?" he asked, overwhelmed by the collection. "The creation records," Scáthach directed, moving to the eastern shelves. "Look for anything regarding Izanami's sealing or the earliest manifestations of the Death Eyes." They worked methodically, examining texts written in languages Naruto didn't recognize. Scáthach translated fragments, piecing together information from multiple sources. "Here," she said after nearly an hour. The original account of Izanami's imprisonment. Naruto joined her, looking over her shoulder at a deteriorating scroll. The characters seemed to shift as he watched, becoming readable. "It says Izanami sought to merge the realms of living and dead," Scáthach translated. "After her own death and entry to Yomi, the underworld, she became convinced the separation was unnatural. She began breaking down the boundaries, allowing the dead to return in corrupted form." "Zombies?" Naruto asked. "Essentially, yes. The text describes walking corpses and spirits possessing the living." Scáthach continued scanning. "Her husband is Izanagi and their divine children combined power to seal her permanently in the deepest level of Yomi. So she's trapped in the underworld. That doesn't sound too bad." "The seal required cosmic balance," Scáthach pointed out. "According to this, part of that balance was the creation of." She paused, eyes widening slightly. "The eyes of death perception. Wait, so my eyes were created as part of sealing this goddess away?" Naruto asked incredulously. "Not your specific eyes," she clarified. "But the potential for them to manifest in mortals. A counterbalance to divine power, the ability to perceive and enforce mortality when immortals overstep." Naruto processed this. "So these eyes appear when gods get out of line. Like cosmic antibodies?" "An apt metaphor," Scáthach agreed, searching for more information. "The accounts suggest they manifest most powerfully when the seal on Izanami weakens. A defensive measure built into reality itself." "And my arrival coincides with the seal weakening," Naruto concluded grimly. "Because that's just my luck." Scáthach found another scroll, this one bound with black silk. "This contains accounts of previous eye-bearers," she said, carefully unrolling it. "Most were killed by divine agents or went mad from the strain of perceiving death constantly." "Super encouraging," Naruto muttered. "But some," she continued, "learned to control the power fully. One in particular," she stopped abruptly, staring at the text. "What? What does it say?" "It describes a bearer who could see beyond individual death lines to the fundamental threads of reality itself." Her voice had grown intense. "They could perceive and cut the bonds between realms, the very fabric of existence." "That sounds dangerous." "It would be," she agreed. "But also invaluable if Izanami's seal is truly weakening. To repair it might require such perception." Naruto leaned against the central pedestal, trying to process everything. "So I'm supposed to, what, reseal an ancient death goddess by cutting reality itself? How would I even do that?" "The text doesn't specify," Scáthach admitted. "But it confirms the connection between your eyes and cosmic balance." She continued searching, pulling out another document, this one a stone tablet with strange markings. "This is older, possibly predating written language." The markings began to shift and change as Naruto looked at them, forming into recognizable symbols. "I can read it," he realized with surprise. "The eyes grant insight into fundamental truths," Scáthach explained. "Including ancient languages connected to death and boundaries." Naruto focused on the tablet. "It says that the viewer of endings can sever bonds between the dead and living worlds. But doing so requires looking into the void between, where all possibilities exist simultaneously." The gap between realms, Scáthach translated. Similar to my shadow lands, but more primordial. Before they could discuss further, a distant rumble shook the archive. Dust drifted from the ceiling as a second, stronger tremor followed. That doesn't sound like normal earthquake, Naruto said. It's not. Scáthach was already gathering key scrolls. Divine manifestation. Takamikazuchi has arrived, likely with allies. Another tremor, more violent, rattled the shelves. Books tumbled to the floor. Time to go, Naruto said, helping collect the most relevant documents. There's one more text, Scáthach began, searching frantically. No time, Naruto insisted as the building shook again. We've got enough to start with. Reluctantly, she nodded. They stuffed the gathered documents into a satchel and hurried from the restricted section. The main archive was in chaos, scholars and guards rushing about as tremors continued to rock the structure. The east exit, Scáthach directed. It leads to the palace gardens where we can lose ourselves in the crowds. They moved swiftly through panicking people, avoiding falling debris as the tremors intensified. Outside, the night sky flashed with unnatural lightning, the unmistakable signature of Takamikazuchi's power. There, a voice shouted as they emerged into a courtyard. The death-eyed demon and the shadow witch. A group of black-armored soldiers, Takamikazuchi's personal guard, blocked their path. Behind them stood a figure that made even Scáthach pause, a man in ornate armor with a demon-like mask covering his face. Unlike the soldiers, he radiated controlled power. Kagetsuna, Scáthach muttered. The moon god's champion. The divine courts have declared you both enemies of celestial order, Kagetsuna announced, his voice deep and resonant despite the mask. Surrender the death-eyed one, Shadow Queen, and you may return to your realm unharmed. Not happening, Naruto replied before Scáthach could speak. We're leaving together. Then you leave me no choice. Kagetsuna drew a sword that gleamed with moonlight. Take them. The soldiers charged forward. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones instantly, engaging the front line while Scáthach's crimson spear materialized in her hand. She moved with lethal grace, her weapon finding gaps in armor with unerring precision. Naruto focused on creating chaos, his clones drawing attention while he and Scáthach worked their way toward an exit. They had nearly reached a side gate when lightning struck directly before them, the ground erupting in chunks of stone. From the crater emerged Takamikazuchi, his face contorted with rage. Golden blood no longer seeped from his shoulder, the wound had healed, but his eyes burned with vindictive memory. Found you, little mouse, the thunder god snarled. And your shadow protector too. Behind him, two more figures appeared, a woman in flowing blue robes and a stern-faced man with starlight glittering in his black hair. More gods, Naruto realized with growing concern. Mizuhame, goddess of sacred waters, Scáthach identified quietly. And Hashiomi, god of night stars. This is no longer a simple capture mission. They're here to kill me, Naruto concluded. Us, Scáthach corrected. I've chosen my side. Takamikazuchi stepped forward, lightning crackling around his sword. The divine courts have deliberated, death-eyed one. Your existence threatens cosmic order. Your taint must be removed. That's what this is about. Naruto asked incredulously. You're embarrassed I cut you, so you brought friends. The thunder god's face darkened further. Your insolence ends tonight. Lightning erupted from his blade, arcing toward Naruto with deadly intent. Naruto dodged, feeling the hair on his arms rise from the electrical charge. Scáthach engaged Hashiomi, her spear a blur against his star-forged daggers. Mizuhame remained back, her hands weaving complex patterns. The ground beneath Naruto suddenly became mud, then quicksand, threatening to drag him down. He leapt free, only to face Kagetsuna's moonlit blade slicing toward his throat. Your world jumping disrupts the natural order, Kagetsuna said as their weapons clashed. The divine balance must be preserved. By killing anyone with power you don't understand? Naruto countered, pushing back. That's not balance, that's control. Around them, Takamikazuchi's soldiers battled Naruto's remaining clones, the courtyard becoming a chaotic battlefield. Civilians fled screaming as divine energies scorched stone and shattered buildings. Naruto found himself surrounded, Takamikazuchi and Kagetsuna pressing from opposite sides while Mizuhame's water techniques limited his movement options. Only his shadow clones and quick substitutions kept him from serious injury. Scáthach wasn't faring much better. Though she matched Hashiomi's speed, the star god's attacks left burning trails in the air that persisted, creating a web of dangerous energy that restricted her movement. We need to retreat, she called to Naruto. We're outnumbered. Working on it. Naruto replied, desperately seeking an opening. His eyes throbbed, the death lines beginning to appear without his conscious activation, a response to the danger. As Takamikazuchi lunged forward with his lightning blade, Naruto saw it clearly, a perfect death line running along the god's weapon. Without thinking, he traced it with his finger as the sword passed. The divine weapon split perfectly in two, its lightning energy dissipating instantly. Takamikazuchi stared in shock at his ruined sword. Impossible, the thunder god roared. A god's weapon cannot be, tell that to your broken sword, Naruto shot back, pressing his advantage. With the thunder god momentarily stunned, he created a massive wave of shadow clones, 50 or more filling the courtyard in an instant. The diversion worked. As gods and soldiers struggled to identify the real Naruto among the clones, he rushed to Scáthach's side, helping her break free from Hashiomi's star web. The eastern wall, she directed, bleeding from several minor wounds. We can breach it. They fought their way through the chaos, Naruto's clones sacrificing themselves to clear a path. When they reached the wall, Scáthach thrust her spear into the stone, creating a spiderweb of cracks. Naruto followed with a Rasengan that blasted the weakened section outward, creating their escape route. Stop them! Takamikazuchi bellowed, but too late. Naruto and Scáthach leapt through the opening, landing in the city streets beyond. They ran without direction, simply putting distance between themselves and their divine pursuers. Behind them, lightning split the sky and buildings trembled as the gods vented their frustration. They're destroying the city looking for us, Naruto observed grimly as they ducked into an alley. Innocent people are getting hurt. Scáthach's expression was equally troubled. The divine courts care little for collateral damage when pursuing those they perceive as threats. Then we need to lead them away from the population, Naruto decided. Get somewhere isolated where civilians won't be in the crossfire. The forest temple to the north, Scáthach suggested. Sacred ground with fewer inhabitants, but space to maneuver. They changed course, moving through back streets and over rooftops. Occasionally, divine energy would flash nearby as their pursuers narrowed the search. Naruto created periodic clone diversions, sending them in opposite directions to confuse the tracking. As they reached the city's northern edge, a water dragon erupted from a canal, nearly engulfing them. Mizuhame had found their trail. Keep moving. Scáthach urged as they dodged the attack. We're almost beyond the residential districts. They sprinted across open ground toward the looming forest. Behind them, three distinctive energy signatures converged, the gods had reunited and were closing fast. Just as they reached the tree line, a figure stepped from the shadows directly in their path, Kagetsuna, his mask gleaming in the moonlight. Impressive evasion, he acknowledged. But this ends now. He raised his hand. Moonlight intensified around them, becoming solid barriers that blocked all directions. A trap, Scáthach realized too late. He wasn't chasing us, he was hurting us. Correct, Shadow Queen. Kagetsuna's voice held no triumph, only grim purpose. The divine courts have judged. The death-eyed one cannot be allowed to continue. The three gods materialized behind them, completing the encirclement. Takamikazuchi looked especially pleased, despite his broken sword. Nowhere left to run, the Thunder God gloated. Your defiance ends here. Naruto and Scáthach stood back to back, weapons ready despite the dire situation. Any brilliant plans? Naruto asked quietly. One, Scáthach replied. But you won't like it. Before she could elaborate, Hashiomi attacked. Stars fell from the sky like deadly missiles, exploding on impact. Naruto and Scáthach separated, dodging in different directions as the ground erupted in starfire. Mizuhame's waters rose next, forming crushing waves that threatened to drown or pulverize. Naruto leapt above them, only to face Takamikazuchi's lightning strikes from the cloud-darkened sky. A bolt caught him squarely, sending him crashing to the earth with every nerve ending screaming in pain. He rolled instinctively, barely avoiding Kagetsuna's sword as it embedded in the ground where his head had been. Your foreign techniques are impressive, Kagetsuna acknowledged, withdrawing his weapon. But divine might cannot be overcome by mortal skills alone. Good thing I've got more than just skills, Naruto replied, his eyes burning as the death lines appeared more vividly than ever. He focused on Kagetsuna, seeing the complex web of lines covering the champion's body. Unlike the gods, whose lines were subtle and difficult to perceive, Kagetsuna's mortality was clear. He was human, despite his divine empowerment. Naruto lunged forward, finger tracing a death line across Kagetsuna's chest plate. The armor split cleanly, exposing vulnerable flesh beneath. The champion's eyes widened behind his mask as he leapt back. The eyes are fully awakened, he called to his divine masters. Proceed with caution. Scáthach, meanwhile, danced between Hashiomi's star blades and Mizuhame's water whips. Her spear left trails of shadow as it countered their attacks, but she was clearly on the defensive. One against two gods was pushing even her legendary skills to their limit. Naruto wanted to help her, but Takamikazuchi and Kagetsuna prevented him from reaching her side. The Thunder God had abandoned his broken sword for pure lightning manipulation, hurling bolts that forced Naruto into constant evasion. Your eyes can't save you if you can't touch us. Takamikazuchi crowed, hovering safely above the battlefield. He was right, at a distance, the death-seeing ability was useless. Naruto needed to get closer, but the combined attacks kept him perpetually off balance. His opportunity came when Mizuhame redirected her water dragons to target him, momentarily. Leaving Scáthach facing only Hashiomi. As water and lightning converged on his position, Naruto activated his eyes fully, ignoring the searing pain that accompanied the heightened perception. Time seemed to slow. The death lines appeared everywhere, not just on his opponents, but on the elements themselves. The water dragons, the lightning bolts, the very air through which they traveled, all contained inherent mortality. Everything that exists can end, he remembered Scáthach saying. Without conscious thought, Naruto traced a line that cut through both incoming attacks simultaneously. Water and lightning separated along perfect seams, their energies dissipating harmlessly to either side of him. All combatants paused, shocked by what they had witnessed. He cut, our divine elements. Mizuhame whispered, genuine fear in her voice. The elements aren't gods, Hashiomi countered, though uncertainty tinged his words. They remain subject to natural laws. Nothing about this is natural. Takamikazuchi raged. He must be destroyed before he learns his full power. The Thunder God raised both hands to the sky, drawing down lightning of unprecedented intensity. The air crackled and burned as massive bolts formed above. Naruto! Scáthach shouted a warning. He's channeling his full divine aspect. You can't block that much energy. She was right. Even with his eyes, Naruto couldn't possibly trace all the death lines in such a massive attack. He needed another approach. As Takamikazuchi prepared to release his ultimate lightning assault, Naruto made a desperate decision. Instead of looking at the lightning itself, he focused on the Thunder God's connection to it, the channel through which divine will controlled elemental power. There, almost invisible but unmistakably present, a death line connecting Takamikazuchi to his own divine lightning. Naruto gathered his remaining strength and leapt impossibly high, directly toward the hovering god. Takumi Kazuchi's eyes widened in shock at the suicidal charge, but it was too late to redirect his attack. As lightning erupted downward, Naruto's finger traced the connection line. The effect was instantaneous. Takumi Kazuchi screamed as his control shattered, divine lightning rebounding chaotically in all directions. Gods, champion, and mortals alike scattered as uncontrolled celestial electricity rampaged across the battlefield. Trees exploded into flames, earth melted to glass, and the very air seemed to catch fire. Naruto fell back to earth, his body numb from the strain of pushing his eyes beyond their limit. His vision blurred, the death lines fading in and out as consciousness threatened to leave him. Through the chaos, he saw Scáthach fighting her way toward him, her spear cutting through debris and residual energy alike. Just as she reached him, a moonlit barrier slammed down between them, Kagutsune's last attempt to separate them. "You've done enough damage," the champion declared, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Stand down before the gods recover their composure and obliterate this entire region." Scáthach's response was to drive her spear into the moonlight barrier with such force that cracks spread across its surface. "Your gods attacked us," she countered. "We defended ourselves." "You stole forbidden knowledge and harbor a cosmic anomaly," Kagutsune argued, reinforcing his barrier. "The divine courts cannot allow such threats to persist." Beyond the barrier, Naruto struggled to his feet. His eyes still burned, but something had changed. The pain had transformed into a different sensation, almost like clarity. The death lines no longer appeared as simple cuts but as a complex system, a language of endings written into the fabric of existence itself. And in that moment of transcendent perception, he saw something that chilled him to the bone. Beneath them, deep below the earth, a massive web of death lines pulsed in a pattern that could only be described as awakening. Something vast and ancient was stirring. "Scáthach," he called out, his voice strained. "There's something under us. Something big." She understood immediately, redoubling her efforts against Kagutsune's barrier. The champion hesitated, sensing a shift in priorities. "What do you mean, something?" he demanded. Before Naruto could answer, the ground beneath them trembled, not from divine combat but from something deeper and more primordial. The tremors intensified, dirt and stones shifting as the earth itself seemed to breathe. Even the gods paused their attacks, sensing the disturbance. Takumi Kazuchi, still weakened from his backfired assault, drifted lower. "What trickery is this?" he demanded, though uncertainty had replaced rage in his voice. "Not trickery," Scáthach replied grimly. "Consequence. Your divine battle has resonated with something below, something that should remain dormant." Hashiomi's star-filled eyes widened in sudden comprehension. "The sealed one stirs." The tremors increased to violent shaking. Fissures opened in the earth, releasing not heat but cold, a bone-deep chill that carried the scent of decay. From one particularly large crack, ghostly shapes began to emerge, twisted spirits with empty eyes and reaching hands. "The dead walk," Mizuhane whispered. "Just as in the ancient texts." Kagutsune lowered his barrier, suddenly more concerned with the emerging threat than capturing Naruto. "This changes matters," he announced. "If the sealed mother truly stirs, our priorities must shift." Naruto staggered to Scáthach's side, leaning on her for support. "I'm guessing that's Izanami down there." "Not directly," she replied quietly. "But her influence seeps through weakened barriers. These are merely harbingers, echoes of her power calling the dead back to the world of the living." The ghostly figures multiplied, pouring from the growing fissures. They moved with singular purpose toward the nearest living beings, gods and mortals alike. "We must retreat and consult the higher courts," Hashiomi decided, already rising toward the stars. "This development requires Tsukuyomi's attention." Mizuhane nodded in agreement, her watery form beginning to disperse. "The bounds between realms thin. This goes beyond a single death-eyed mortal." Only Takumi Kazuchi remained reluctant, his wounded pride still demanding vengeance. But as more spirits emerged, even he recognized the greater threat. This isn't finished, he warned Naruto before rising into storm clouds. But other matters take precedence, for now. With the gods withdrawing, only Kagetsuna remained, eyeing the approaching spirits with professional assessment. You should leave as well, Scáthach advised him. Your moonlight techniques will have limited effect on the truly dead. The champion regarded them thoughtfully. You know what this means, he stated rather than asked. The death-eyed one's appearance was no coincidence. We suspected as much, Scáthach acknowledged. Now we have confirmation. Kagetsuna nodded once. I will report what I've witnessed. The divine courts will reassess their approach. He turned to leave, then paused. But be warned, some will see him as the cause rather than the solution. Protection may turn to persecution swiftly. With that, he vanished in a flash of moonlight, leaving Naruto and Scáthach alone with the advancing spirits. Please tell me you have a way out of here, Naruto said, eyeing the ghostly horde. The boundary between worlds is already weakened here, she observed. Creating a path to the Shadow Lands should be simple. She raised her hand, drawing shadow essence from the deepening night. As before, darkness coalesced into a key-like shape, but this time the process was faster, easier. The barriers thin everywhere, she murmured. Not a good sign. Before she could turn the key, a spectral figure lunged from the horde, faster, more substantial than the others. It wore the tattered remains of scholarly robes. Wait. Naruto recognized the face despite its ghostly pallor. That's the old man from the library. Indeed, the spirit bore the features of the elderly scholar they had seen during their research. Unlike the other mindless spirits, awareness showed in his eyes, tormented awareness. She comes. The spectral scholar croaked, his voice like dry leaves rustling. Mother of all awakens from below. Who took you? Scáthach demanded. How were you turned? Darkness, beneath the library. The spirit's form wavered, as if maintaining coherence required immense effort. Ancient tablet, stolen, the key. What key? Naruto asked urgently. What tablet? The severing stone. The scholar managed before his form began to dissipate. Without it, no repair possible. She will rise. With those final words, the scholar's spirit dissolved into mist, returning to formlessness like a puppet with cut strings. Scáthach's expression had grown increasingly troubled. The severing stone, she repeated. A mythical artifact said to contain the original template for cosmic boundaries. And someone stole it from under the library, Naruto concluded. Perfect. The other spirits had nearly reached them, their empty eyes fixed on the living with hungry intent. Scáthach turned the shadow key, opening a rift to her realm. We must go, she urged. These spirits are merely the first sign. If Izanami truly awakens, far worse will follow. They stepped through the portal together, the chill of the Shadowlands replacing the unnatural cold of the emerging dead. As the rift sealed behind them, Naruto couldn't shake the image of those spirits pouring from the earth, or the scholar's final warning. So what now? He asked once they stood safely in Scáthach's realm. We know Izanami is waking up, someone stole the one thing that might fix the problem, and the gods are still after us. Now, Scáthach replied, her crimson eyes reflecting determination, we prepare for war. Divine, undead, and everything in between. She began walking toward her fortress, their stolen scrolls clutched tightly. But first, we study. Your eyes have evolved beyond mere death perception. What you did to Takamikazuchi's divine connection was unprecedented. I just saw the line and cut it, Naruto said with a shrug that belied the significance. You severed a god's connection to his own divine aspect, Scáthach emphasized. That's not merely seeing death, it's perceiving the fundamental connections that bind existence together. Naruto thought about the massive web of lines he'd seen pulsing beneath the earth. If Izanami is breaking free, can I use that same ability to, reseal her somehow? Perhaps, Scáthach admitted. But it would require understanding exactly what connections to cut, and which to preserve. Reality itself hangs in the balance. Great. No pressure or anything. I need to try contacting Kurama again, Naruto decided. With everything going crazy, maybe the connection to my world is stronger now. Scáthach considered this. The thinning barriers might indeed make such contact possible. We should test the limits of these changes. As they neared the fortress, shadowy servants emerged to greet them, taking the scrolls for safekeeping. Scáthach led Naruto to a central chamber he hadn't seen before, a perfect circle with strange symbols carved into the floor and walls. The heart of shadows, she explained. The thinnest point between realms in my domain. If you can reach your fox spirit from anywhere, it would be here. Naruto stepped into the center of the circle, feeling an immediate resonance with the space, as if gravity worked differently, or time flowed at a different rate. I'll leave you to concentrate, Scáthach said, moving toward the door. The chamber amplifies connection attempts. But be cautious, with barriers thinning, you might connect with more than you intend. Meaning? Her expression grew solemn. Meaning Izanami isn't the only entity that might notice a bridge forming between realms. With that warning, she departed, leaving Naruto alone in the circular chamber. He sat cross-legged in the center, closing his eyes and focusing inward as he had countless times before. The familiar meditation brought him to his inner mindscape, but instead of the usual sewer-like tunnels or open landscape, he found himself in absolute darkness. No sign of Kurama's cage or presence. Kurama, he called into the void. You there, buddy? Silence answered him. But something felt different this time, a tension in the emptiness, like the moment before lightning strikes. I know you're out there somewhere, Naruto continued. The barriers between worlds are getting thinner. If you can hear me at all. A flicker of response, not words or images but a feeling. Recognition. Distance. Warning. Kurama. Naruto pushed harder, reaching into the darkness with his consciousness. I'm stuck in a world with gods and death eyes and some sealed goddess trying to break free. Could really use your help here. The response strengthened, definitely Kurama, but separated by vast distance. Impressions rather than words formed in Naruto's mind, searching. Found. Coming. Danger. You're looking for me. Hope surged through Naruto. You know where I am. More impressions, tracked. Chakra. Bridge forming. Others watching. Others? What others? Naruto asked, but the connection was already fading, Kurama's presence receding like a tide. As it withdrew, something else brushed against Naruto's consciousness, something ancient and cold and hungry. A presence so vast it made even Kurama seem small by comparison. Found you, whispered a voice that wasn't a voice. My counterbalance. My undoing. My freedom. Naruto recoiled, instinctively severing the connection. He snapped back to physical awareness with a gasp, finding himself still in Scáthach's chamber but drenched in cold sweat. Izanami, he whispered, recognizing the presence that had touched his mind. Somehow, in reaching for Kurama, he had caught the attention of the sealed goddess herself. And she had been waiting for him all along. Chapter 3, God's Fall. Naruto burst into Scáthach's study, still shaking from his encounter in the Heart of Shadows. She looked up from the ancient scrolls spread across her desk, immediately alert at his expression. I reached Kurama, he blurted. For a second, at least. But something else found me too. Scáthach rose swiftly. Izanami? Yeah. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. She called me her counterbalance and her freedom in the same breath. Like she's been waiting for me. This confirms our worst fears. Scáthach paced the room. Your arrival and her awakening are directly connected. Great. So I accidentally helped wake up a death goddess. Add that to my resume. Naruto collapsed into a chair. But Kurama's looking for me. He knows I'm here, or at least what world I'm in. He's trying to find a way through. That may be both blessing and curse, Scáthach cautioned. Any bridge formed could become a pathway for Izanami's influence as well. Naruto's face fell. So even my rescue might make things worse. Not necessarily. Scáthach tapped a scroll thoughtfully. If controlled properly, such a connection might be exactly what we need to restore the boundary between realms. A commotion outside interrupted them. One of Scáthach's shadow servants materialized through the wall, its formless face conveying urgency. "My queen," it whispered in a voice like rustling leaves. Divine envoys approach the outer boundary. They request audience. Scáthach's eyes narrowed. How many? 3 entities of divine essence, accompanied by the Moon Champion. Naruto tensed. Takumi Kazuchi coming for round 2? I detect no thunder essence, the servant replied. These are different divinities. Scáthach and Naruto exchanged glances. Could be a trap, he warned. Or an opportunity, she countered. We need allies, divine ones especially, if we're to address Izanami's awakening. After a moment's consideration, she turned to the servant. Admit them to the outer court only. Double the boundary wards. As the servant vanished, Scáthach retrieved her crimson spear. Prepare yourself, but show restraint. If they wanted simple violence, they wouldn't request audience. They proceeded to a large courtyard Naruto hadn't seen before, an open space with high walls and a single massive gate. Shadow warriors took positions along the perimeter as the gate swung open silently. 4 figures entered, Kagetsuna in his distinctive masked armor, leading 3 beings of unmistakable divine presence. An elderly man with a scholar's robes and impossibly long white beard, a stern-faced man with midnight black hair and silver eyes, and a serene woman in flowing water-patterned garments. Omoikane, Tsukuyomi, and Mizuhame, Scáthach identified quietly. The gods of wisdom, moon, and sacred waters. A significant delegation. Naruto recognized Omoikane from the archives and Mizuhame from the battle, but Tsukuyomi was new, and by far the most intimidating, radiating cold power that made the air around him shimmer slightly. Scáthach of the Shadowlands, Tsukuyomi spoke first, his voice perfectly measured. We come under truce banner to discuss matters of cosmic urgency. An unexpected honor, Scáthach replied with formal caution. Especially after your court sent agents to kill my guest. Circumstances have evolved, Omoikane interjected smoothly. The emergence of the Walking Dead changes priorities. So you've noticed, Naruto said dryly. Hard to miss when corpses start crawling out of the ground. Mizuhame, who had tried to drown him days earlier, regarded him with new interest. The death-eyed one speaks boldly for a mortal addressing gods. I've met plenty of gods, Naruto shrugged. Some were friends, some tried to kill me. You guys are somewhere in the middle right now. Tsukuyomi's silver eyes narrowed slightly, but Omoikane actually chuckled. Refreshing directness. Perhaps that's why the eyes chose him. Why exactly are you here? Scáthach pressed. If it's to request our help with Izanami, you should know we're already working on the problem. Our divination confirms what you likely already suspect, Tsukuyomi stated. The severing stone has been stolen from the Imperial Archives. Without it, repairing the boundary between realms becomes nearly impossible. And you think we took it? Naruto asked incredulously. No, Omoikane answered. We believe Takumi Kazuchi did. That caught both Naruto and Scáthach by surprise. Your own thunder god, she asked. Kagetsuna stepped forward. Takumi Kazuchi has vanished from the divine courts. He was last seen entering the restricted archives 2 nights ago. When Guardians investigated, they found the severing stone missing and several forbidden texts on Yomi's boundaries disturbed. After his humiliation, at your hands, Mizuhame added with a glance at Naruto, his behavior became increasingly erratic. The divine courts now suspect he seeks to make a bargain with the sealed mother. A bargain? Naruto's brow furrowed. What could he possibly want badly enough to release a death goddess? Power to destroy you, Tsukuyomi stated bluntly. And vengeance against those who humiliated him. He'd risk the entire world for that. Naruto couldn't hide his disbelief. Divine pride is a terrible force, Scáthach noted grimly. And Takumi Kazuchi was never among the wisest gods. Omoikane nodded solemnly. We believe he intends to offer the severing stone to Izanami in exchange for power to overcome your death eyes. In his wounded pride, he fails to understand she will use him merely as a vessel for her full awakening. That's why we're here, Tsukuyomi continued. To propose alliance against common threat. Your abilities, he nodded to Naruto, particularly your evolved perception of connections between realms, may be crucial to preventing catastrophe. Naruto glanced at Scáthach, who gave a subtle nod. You tried to kill me a few days ago, he reminded them. Now you want my help. The divine courts were hasty in their judgment, Mizuhame admitted reluctantly. We saw only the threat your eyes posed to divine authority, not their purpose as cosmic counterbalance. We offer knowledge and resources in exchange for cooperation, Omoikane added. Including potential methods to return you to your original world, should we succeed. Now they had Naruto's full attention. You know how to send me home? Theoretically, the wisdom god qualified. The same principles that would repair the boundary between life and death could create a controlled passage between dimensional planes. Naruto and Scáthach exchanged another look, having a silent conversation through subtle expressions. Finally, she spoke. We accept alliance, with conditions. No deception, no holding back critical information, and when this crisis ends, Naruto chooses his own fate, whether to return home or remain here. Tsukuyomi considered this, then inclined his head slightly. Acceptable terms, provided his choice doesn't threaten cosmic balance. One more thing, Naruto added. Takumi Kazuchi gets a fair trial for what he's doing, not just blasted out of existence. He's being an idiot, but it sounds like he's being manipulated too. This request clearly surprised the gods, but after a moment, Omoikane nodded. Justice rather than vengeance. A noble distinction. With terms agreed, the atmosphere in the courtyard relaxed marginally. Kagetsuna removed his mask in a gesture of trust, revealing a handsome, scarred face with eyes that held centuries of experience despite his apparent youth. We should begin immediately, he suggested. Our scouts report increasing disturbances worldwide. Their planning session moved to Scáthach's central hall, where maps and ancient texts covered a massive stone table. Omoikane and Scáthach pored over the most critical documents while Kagetsuna marked locations of recent undead sightings on a world map. The outbreaks follow a pattern, he observed, connecting points with a stylus. Forming a spiral that centers here, he tapped a remote mountain range, the ancient pass of Yomi. One of the original entrances to the underworld, Mizuhame confirmed. Sealed since Izanami's imprisonment. Naruto studied the map. So that's where Takumi Kazuchi took the stone. Most likely, Tsukuyomi agreed. The pass would provide the thinnest barrier between worlds. Then that's where we need to go, Naruto decided. Stop him before he completes whatever ritual he's planning. It's not that simple, Omoikane cautioned. The severing stone isn't merely a key, it's a template for reality's boundaries. Even approaching it requires protection against its raw power. Which is why we brought these. Mizuhame produced a small lacquered box from her flowing robes. Inside lay 5 metal discs, each inscribed with complex symbols. Boundary seals, forged from celestial metal. They allow safe navigation through areas of reality distortion. Scáthach inspected one closely. Ancient work. Izanagi's craftsmanship, if I'm not mistaken. His tools from the original ceiling, Omoikane confirmed. Preserved for an emergency we hoped would never come. They continued planning through the night, comparing notes on Izanami's powers, the Severing Stone's capabilities, and Naruto's evolving abilities. By dawn, or what passed for dawn in the Shadowlands, they had formulated their approach. "We'll need more allies," Kagetsuna pointed out. "Even with divine support, attacking the pass of Yomi during an awakening will require significant forces. I can provide warriors from the Shadowlands," Scáthach offered. "But they cannot stray far from death's borders. The Emperor has authorized his sacred guard," Tsukuyomi added. "And several minor deities have pledged support." "What about regular people?" Naruto asked. "The ones who'll suffer most if Izanami breaks free." The divine representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Mortals would be vulnerable to corruption near the boundary," Mizuhame explained delicately. "But they deserve to know what's happening," Naruto insisted. "This is their world too." "The boy is right," Omoikane surprised everyone by agreeing. "Divine secrecy has created distance between realms that should exist in harmony. Perhaps that imbalance itself contributes to our current predicament." After further discussion, they reached consensus: divine heralds would spread warning throughout major population centers while gathering volunteers with spiritual training who might assist the effort. Meanwhile, Naruto would work with Scáthach and Omoikane to master the precise perception needed to identify and repair boundary weaknesses. As the meeting concluded, Tsukuyomi approached Naruto privately. "You continue to surprise, Death-Eyed One. Few mortals advocate for divine accountability." "Where I come from, power means responsibility," Naruto replied simply. "No matter who wields it." A ghost of a smile touched the moon god's usually stern face. "Your world sounds intriguingly balanced. Perhaps that's why you were chosen for this task." Before Naruto could respond, the god's expression sharpened. "Be warned, however. Scáthach's interest in you extends beyond your cosmic role." "Yeah, I figured that out." Naruto glanced across the room where Scáthach conversed with Kagetsuna. "She wants me to kill her someday." "A simplified understanding," Tsukuyomi noted. "Her immortality is her prison, but also this realm's anchor. Should she finally achieve the death she craves?" He left the implications hanging. Naruto frowned, processing this new complication. The Shadowlands would collapse. Among other consequences. The moon god's silver eyes studied him carefully. "Choose wisely when the moment comes." With that cryptic warning, Tsukuyomi rejoined the other gods, leaving Naruto with more questions than answers. Over the next 3 days, reports flooded in from across the world, all confirming their worst fears. The dead walked in increasing numbers, not just near the Yomi Pass but everywhere boundaries between worlds grew thin. Rivers ran backwards, animals exhibited unnatural behaviors, and in some locations, reality itself seemed to warp. The symptoms accelerate faster than predicted, Omoikane observed grimly as they gathered to review the latest information. Takamikazuchi must have already begun the unsealing process. "Then we move now," Scáthach decided. "Ready or not?" Naruto had spent the intervening time in grueling practice with his eyes, pushing their limits under Omoikane's guidance. The wisdom god's knowledge combined with Scáthach's practical combat experience had helped him progress rapidly, though the strain left him exhausted each night. "Are you certain you're prepared?" Mizuhame asked as they geared up for departure. "Your ability to perceive and sever reality's connections is our primary countermeasure." "I'm as ready as I'll get without actually trying it," Naruto replied honestly. "Some things you just have to learn in the moment." Their assembled force was impressive: shadow warriors from Scáthach's realm, imperial guards in gleaming armor, and a contingent of minor gods and spirits loyal to the main divine courts. Most surprising to Naruto were the mortal volunteers, monks, shrine maidens, and spiritually gifted individuals who had answered the call despite the dangers. "They fight for their world," Kagetsuna explained when Naruto commented on their courage. "As Moon Champion, I was once such a mortal myself, before divine service extended my life. They departed through multiple gateways, the divine forces traveling via celestial paths while Scáthach created shadow passages for the others. Naruto, wearing one of the boundary seals as a pendant, accompanied her through the primary rift that opened directly onto the foothills leading to Yomi Pass. The landscape that greeted them sent chills down his spine. What should have been lush mountain forest had transformed into a twisted parody of life, trees bent at impossible angles with bark that pulsed like flesh, ground that rippled in slow waves, and sky that cycled through colors no nature had intended. Reality fractures here, Scáthach observed, her crimson spear materializing in her hand. The boundary between realms already fails. As their forces consolidated, a disturbing sight greeted them on the path ahead, humanoid figures shambling down from the pass. Not ordinary undead, but something worse, bodies fused with earth and vegetation, moving with jerky purpose. Izanami's bridgers, Omoikane identified grimly. Vessels merging elements of both realms. They seek to expand the corrupted territory. Then they don't get past us, Naruto declared, creating a line of shadow clones to form a defensive perimeter. The battle joined immediately and brutally. The bridgers, while slow, proved nearly impossible to permanently destroy, severed limbs continued moving independently, and conventional weapons merely reshaped their malleable forms. Naruto discovered that his eyes were particularly effective against them. Tracing their death lines caused them to collapse into inert matter, unable to maintain the unnatural fusion of living and dead elements. Their scouts, Kagetsuna called out after they had dispatched the initial wave. Testing our defenses. Then the real opposition awaits ahead, Tsukuyomi concluded, his moonlight blade gleaming as he cleaned it of viscous residue. They advanced cautiously up the mountain path, reality growing increasingly distorted with each step. The boundary seals provided some protection, creating bubbles of normal physics around each wearer, but even these flickered under the strain. When they reached a plateau halfway up the mountain, the true extent of the crisis became apparent. A massive rift had opened in the mountainside, not a natural cave but a wound in reality itself. The edges pulsed with sickly light, and from within came sounds no human throat could produce. Before the rift stood a familiar figure, Takamikazuchi, but horrifically transformed. The thunder god's body had elongated unnaturally, his skin cracked with golden light pouring from within. Lightning no longer surrounded him but seemed to flow through his veins, visible beneath translucent flesh. Too late, he called out in a voice layered with another, deeper tone. The bargain is struck. The mother rises. And I am reborn. Takamikazuchi. Tsukuyomi stepped forward. Return the severing stone. You cannot comprehend the forces you unleash. The weak Takamikazuchi you knew is gone, the transformed god replied. I am his ascension. His perfect form. And soon, all divine courts will bow before me or perish. Naruto activated his eyes, and immediately wished he hadn't. The death lines covering Takamikazuchi had transformed into a chaotic web, with thick black cords extending from his body into the rift behind him. Something was using him as a conduit, something vast and ancient. He's connected directly to Izanami, Naruto warned the others. She's channeling power through him. Then we sever that connection first, Scáthach decided. She turned to the assembled forces. Engage the transformed god. Keep him occupied while Naruto and I attempt to reach the rift. The battle erupted across the plateau. Takamikazuchi proved devastatingly powerful in his enhanced state, each lightning strike left glassy craters in the stone, and his movements blurred between locations as if the concepts of space and time held limited meaning for him. Tsukuyomi and Mizuhame led the divine contingent against him directly, moonlight and sacred water combining in attacks that would have obliterated lesser beings. The mortal and shadow forces handled waves of bridgers that continued emerging from smaller rifts around the plateau. Naruto and Scáthach fought their way toward the main rift, covering each other with practiced coordination developed during their training sessions. When Takamikazuchi noticed their intent, he howled with rage, sending a massive lightning bolt directly at them. Now! Scáthach shouted. Naruto activated his eyes fully, perceiving the death line in the divine lightning itself. With a quick gesture, he traced it, splitting the bolt around them as they continued forward. Impressive evolution, Omoikane commented as he joined them, deflecting corrupted bridgers with barriers of pure knowledge. Your perception extends to energy manifestations now. I'm seeing more than just death lines, Naruto explained as they fought. It's like, the connections between things. How they relate to each other. Exactly what we need, the wisdom god confirmed. Look for the nexus point where Takamikazuchi connects to the rift. That's our first target. They pressed forward against increasingly desperate resistance. Takamikazuchi, realizing their strategy, redoubled his attacks on their position while summoning more bridgers from the rift. We can't reach the main connection point with him blocking us. Naruto shouted over the chaos of battle. We need to deal with him first. Scáthach's eyes met his, a decision forming. I'll engage him directly. Create your opening. Before he could protest, she launched herself toward Takamikazuchi with blinding speed, her crimson spear leaving trails of shadow as it struck at the transformed god. The unexpected frontal assault forced him to focus on her, creating the diversion they needed. Now, while she has his attention. Omoikane urged. Naruto circled around, using shadow clones as additional distractions. When he reached a position with clear view of Takamikazuchi's back, he saw it, the primary connection line, thicker than the others, running from the base of the thunder god's spine directly into the rift. Focusing his eyes until they burned with strain, Naruto traced the massive line with his finger. For a moment nothing happened, the connection was too powerful, too fundamental to sever easily. He pushed harder, channeling chakra into his perception. With a sound like reality tearing, the connection snapped. Takamikazuchi screamed, his transformed body convulsing as the power flow from Izanami suddenly cut off. He collapsed to his knees, golden light pouring from his mouth and eyes. Impossible, he gasped in his own voice, the deeper tones gone. She promised, power eternal. She lied, Naruto said simply, approaching the fallen god cautiously. Gods do that sometimes. Before anyone could secure Takamikazuchi, the ground beneath them heaved violently. The main rift widened, its edges tearing further into normal reality. From within emerged a hand, impossibly large, with skin like ancient parchment covered in swirling symbols. You sever one connection, I form another, spoke a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It carried neither gender nor emotion, just ancient, inexorable purpose. The weave of realms unravels regardless. The hand reached further out, fingers spreading wide as if to grasp the entire mountain. Where it touched, reality corroded, stone turning to dust, air becoming visible as colored mist, light bending into impossible angles. Izanami manifests. Tsukuyomi shouted, his usual composure shattered by genuine alarm. Fall back. Regroup. Naruto stood transfixed, his eyes showing him the true horror of what emerged. Not merely a physical being, but a concept taking form, death and corruption and rebirth twisted together into something that should never exist in material reality. The severing stone. Omoikane called to him. Look for it. It must be at the rift's edge, anchoring her emergence. Tearing his gaze from the manifesting horror, Naruto scanned the area around the rift. His enhanced perception revealed a small object half buried in corrupted earth, a smooth black stone covered in lines that didn't indicate death but rather division and connection simultaneously. There. He pointed, already moving toward it. Scáthach reached his side, breathing hard from her battle with Takamikazuchi. We must remove it from the rift's influence. Too late for that, came a weak voice behind them. Takamikazuchi, still on his knees, laughed bitterly. She's already used its power to weaken the boundaries. Taking it now only prevents repair. Another violent tremor shook the mountain as a second massive hand emerged from the rift. The air grew thick with the scent of decay and renewal mingled together, the essence of Izanami's domain where death and rebirth lost all distinction. "We need a new plan," Naruto shouted to the wisdom god. "Taking the stone isn't enough." Omoikane's ancient eyes focused on him with sudden intensity. "You must use what you've learned. Your eyes see beyond individual death to the connections between realms themselves. You must perceive the boundary's original pattern and restore it." "How?" Naruto demanded. "I can cut connections, not fix them." The severing stone holds the original pattern, Scáthach realized. If you can perceive it while touching the stone. Understanding dawned. I could see how everything should connect, not just how to cut it. Another tremor, stronger than before. A face began to emerge from the rift, beautiful and horrifying simultaneously, with features that shifted between rotted flesh and newborn perfection with each passing moment. "Hurry!" Tsukuyomi urged as he directed divine forces to contain the emerging bridgers. "We cannot hold back her manifestation much longer." Naruto sprinted toward the severing stone, dodging warped reality and corrupted matter. Just as he reached it, the ground beneath the stone liquefied, causing it to sink rapidly into the earth. Without thinking, he plunged his hand into the corrupting matter, ignoring the burning sensation as it tried to transform his flesh. His fingers closed around the stone just as it nearly disappeared. The moment he touched it, his perception exploded. The death lines he'd grown accustomed to seeing were suddenly joined by life lines, connection lines, possibility lines, an infinite web of relationships defining all existence. The sheer volume of information nearly overwhelmed his consciousness. "Focus." Scáthach's voice cut through his disorientation. She had followed him, her spear creating a temporary zone of stability around them. "Find the pattern of the boundary." Naruto clutched the stone tighter, letting its knowledge flow into him. There, amid the chaos of information, he perceived it, the original design of separation between realms. Not a wall but a membrane, permeable in specific ways that allowed natural cycles while preventing collapse into undifferentiated chaos. "I see it," he gasped. "The boundary isn't meant to be solid, it's supposed to flex." "Yes." Omoikane confirmed, joining them despite the danger. "Life and death are separated but connected through proper channels. Izanami seeks to remove all distinction." Naruto understood now. He wasn't meant to rebuild a wall between realms but to restore proper differentiation, the natural order where death remained distinct from life while still participating in the greater cycle. But how to implement this understanding? His eyes showed the pattern, but his ability had always been destruction, not creation. A massive tremor nearly knocked them off their feet as Izanami's manifestation continued. Her face had fully emerged now, and shoulders were beginning to push through the widening rift. Reality itself screamed in protest at the violation of natural law. "I can see what needs to happen," Naruto shouted over the cacophony, "but I don't know how to make it happen." Scáthach's crimson eyes met his, sudden understanding dawning. The eyes destroy specific connections, yes. But destruction can be creation when properly directed. She gripped his shoulder. "Don't try to rebuild the old boundary. Cut away what doesn't belong to reveal the true pattern beneath." It clicked into place. Naruto raised the severing stone in one hand while activating his eyes to their fullest extent. Pain seared through his skull as his perception expanded beyond anything he'd attempted before. The entirety of the damaged boundary appeared before him, not just at this location but everywhere it existed. And throughout it, he saw false connections, parasitic attachments where Izanami's influence had corrupted the natural pattern. "Everyone get back," he warned. "This might get messy." With the severing stone amplifying his ability, Naruto began systematically tracing the false connections, cutting away Izanami's corruption from reality's proper pattern. Each severed line released explosive energy, but also allowed the natural boundary to reassert itself. Izanami sensed what he was doing. Her partially manifested form lurched toward him, reality warping around her movements. Counterbalance, her voice thundered. You exist because I exist. Cut me away, and you cut away yourself. She lies. Omoikane shouted. Your power responds to cosmic need, but you are not bound to her fate. Naruto continued his work, sweat pouring down his face as the strain threatened to overwhelm him. Each cut required perfect precision, too much force would damage the natural boundary, too little would leave corruption behind. Scáthach and the divine forces formed a protective ring around him, battling the increasingly desperate attacks from bridgers and reality distortions. Takamikazuchi, seemingly forgotten, crawled away from the conflict. As Naruto severed more connections, Izanami's manifestation began to struggle, her emergence slowing then stopping. You cannot undo what has already begun, she hissed, her voice now sounding from the rift itself. The boundaries weaken across all worlds. My influence spreads beyond this realm. That statement triggered a realization in Naruto. The connections extended beyond this world, including back to his own. The thinning boundaries had allowed Kurama to sense him across dimensions. That's it, he exclaimed. I need to stabilize all connected realms simultaneously. Using the severing stone as focus, Naruto expanded his perception further, following connection lines that extended to other worlds, including a familiar one where chakra flowed differently. His world. There, he sensed a massive concentration of familiar energy, Kurama, along with what felt like Sasuke and others, attempting to create a bridge to reach him. Their efforts, while well-intentioned, were inadvertently weakening the same boundaries he was trying to restore. Naruto faced an impossible choice: continue his repairs and close off the pathway home, or leave the weakness and risk Izanami's influence spreading to his world too. I can feel my friends trying to reach me, he told Scáthach, who maintained her protective stance beside him. If I finish this, I might never get home. Her crimson eyes showed understanding but no pity. Choose, Naruto. No one else can make this decision. With sudden clarity, Naruto realized there might be a third option. Instead of closing all connections or leaving them weak, he could establish a specific, controlled pathway, like a pressure valve in the cosmic boundary. Focusing on the severing stone's pattern, he began a more nuanced approach, cutting Izanami's corrupt connections while simultaneously reinforcing a single, specific bridge between worlds. Not wide enough for uninvited influences to cross, but sufficient for intentional travel when necessary. No. Izanami's voice rose in fury as she sensed his strategy. You cannot limit me. I am the mother of all. Life and death are mine to command. Life and death need boundaries, Naruto countered, continuing his work despite the mounting pain. That's what makes them meaningful. With a final, tremendous effort, Naruto completed the pattern. The severing stone grew hot in his hand, then shattered into dust as its purpose was fulfilled. A shockwave of pure force erupted from the point where he stood, expanding outward in all directions. Where it passed, reality snapped back into proper alignment. The rift before them contracted violently, Izanami's partially manifested form being pulled back into it despite her howls of rage. Bridges collapsed into inert matter, the corrupted landscape began reverting to natural forms, and the sickly light faded from the air. The boundary restores itself. Omoikane exclaimed. The pattern is re-established. Naruto collapsed to his knees, utterly drained. Blood trickled from his eyes and nose from the strain of maintaining such expanded perception. But he smiled despite the pain. I left a door, he managed to say before unconsciousness claimed him. A small one. Just in case. Naruto drifted in darkness, weightless and painless. Had he died? Was this what waited beyond life? If so, it seemed rather boring. Wake up, you idiot. The familiar voice jolted him. That definitely wasn't a heavenly greeting. Kurama, he mumbled, struggling toward consciousness. Not quite, came Scáthach's voice instead. Naruto's eyes fluttered open to find himself in his chamber in Scáthach's fortress, the warrior queen seated beside his bed. Despite her composed expression, the dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't left his side for some time. "How long was I out?" he croaked, his throat dry. 3 days, she replied, offering a cup of water. Your mind needed time to recover from the strain. As his senses returned, Naruto took stock of his condition. His body felt functional if weak, but something else had changed. His eyes no longer burned with the constant presence of death lines. When he tried to activate the perception, it responded but felt different. More controlled, less invasive. The eyes, he murmured. They've changed. Evolved would be more accurate, Scáthach explained. According to Omoikane, they've integrated fully with your being. No longer foreign power but part of you. Naruto attempted to sit up, succeeding with Scáthach as assistance. Izanami. The boundary. Contained and restored, she assured him. Your work was unprecedented. Omoikane claims no mortal has ever manipulated cosmic boundaries with such precision. Lucky guess, Naruto joked weakly. Did everyone make it? A shadow crossed Scáthach's face. We lost 17 shadow warriors, 12 imperial guards, and 3 of the volunteer spiritualists. Their sacrifices ensured our success. Naruto bowed his head briefly in respect for the fallen. And Takumi Kazuchi? Captured by Tsukuyomi's forces, she reported. His divine essence is severely diminished after being used as Izanami's conduit. He awaits judgment from the divine courts. At least he'll get that trial I asked for, Naruto murmured. Then he remembered his final action before losing consciousness. The doorway I created, did it work? Can I still go home? Scáthach's expression became carefully neutral. Yes. Omoikane confirms you established a stable connection point between realms. When you're fully recovered, returning to your world would be possible. Something in her tone caught Naruto's attention. But? She looked away briefly. The connection works both ways. Your friend, the fox spirit, has been attempting contact. His energy signature grows stronger daily. Naruto felt a surge of hope. Kurama's coming for me? Apparently so, she confirmed. Though Omoikane warns that transporting a being of such power across realms remains dangerous. The doorway you created is narrow by design. Naruto fell silent, processing everything. He could go home, or Kurama might find a way to reach him here. Either way, the isolation he'd felt since arriving in this world would end. So why didn't he feel unambiguously happy about it? His gaze fell on Scáthach, who maintained her composed expression despite the tension evident in her posture. The realization struck him, she believed he would leave immediately. What happens to the Shadow Lands if I go? He asked carefully. They continue as they have for millennia, she replied evenly. My domain remains. And you? Something flickered in her crimson eyes, a vulnerability she rarely allowed to surface. I remain as well. The immortal queen of a twilight realm. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Naruto understood suddenly what Tsukuyomi had tried to warn him about. You hoped I would end your immortality, he stated rather than asked. Scáthach met his gaze directly. Initially, yes. The mystic eyes of death perception offered possibility of an honorable end to an existence that has stretched far beyond its natural span. And now? Her composure wavered slightly. Now I find myself, conflicted. Death was simpler when it represented only release. Now it would also mean loss. The admission cost her visibly. Scáthach, the ancient warrior queen who had faced countless battles without flinching, found acknowledging her own emotions more challenging than any physical threat. I'm not going anywhere yet, Naruto decided aloud. Even if Kurama finds a way through, I have unfinished business here. Relief and confusion battled in Scáthach's expression. Your world needs its hero returned. They've managed without me for this long, he countered. And I'm not fully recovered, am I? Rushing through a cosmic doorway while weakened sounds like asking for trouble. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. A surprisingly prudent assessment from one who typically charges headlong into danger. I'm growing, Naruto grinned. Besides, someone needs to make sure this boundary stays fixed. Who better than the guy who fixed it in the first place? Scáthach studied him, her ancient eyes seeing through his casual explanation to the truth beneath. You stay for more than duty. It wasn't a question, but Naruto answered anyway. Yeah. I do. The admission shifted something between them, an acknowledgement of what had been building throughout their time together. Not merely mentor and student, not just allies against cosmic threat, but two beings who had found unexpected connection across the gulf of their different origins. The divine courts wish to honor you formally, Scáthach said after a moment, her professional demeanor returning though softened at the edges. Tsukimi himself will preside over the ceremony once you're well enough to attend. God's giving me medals, Naruto chuckled. That's new. More than medals, she corrected. They offer you status as divine intermediary, official bridge between mortal and divine realms. Such recognition from the celestial courts is unprecedented. Do I have to wear fancy robes and talk all formal? He asked skeptically. Scáthach's lips quirked upward. I imagine they would accept your unique approach to protocol, given the circumstances. Naruto shifted, attempting to stand. His legs wobbled treacherously, and Scáthach moved quickly to support him. Still weak, he admitted grudgingly. You reformed cosmic boundaries with your mind, she reminded him. Physical recovery will require patience. With her assistance, Naruto managed to walk to the window overlooking the perpetual twilight of the Shadowlands. The realm seemed different somehow, still caught between worlds, but more vibrant, the shadows less oppressive. Has your domain changed, or have my eyes? He asked. Both, perhaps, Scáthach replied, standing close beside him. The restoration of proper boundaries affects all connected realms. The Shadowlands exist at intersection points, they would naturally reflect the change. It's beautiful, Naruto observed. In a weird, gloomy sort of way. She smiled genuinely then, a rare expression that transformed her severe features. High praise indeed. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching shadow warriors train in the courtyard below. After several minutes, Naruto turned to face her directly. When I first arrived, you saw me as a potential end to your immortality, he said bluntly. What do you see now? The directness of the question caught her off guard, centuries of carefully maintained distance warring with newfound honesty. I see possibility, she finally answered. Something I had forgotten could exist. Good answer, Naruto approved. With characteristic boldness, he leaned forward and kissed her. For a moment Scáthach remained perfectly still, as if even her immortal heart had temporarily stopped. Then she responded, centuries of isolation crumbling as she pulled him closer. When they eventually separated, her crimson eyes held wonder tinged with lingering caution. This complicates matters considerably. I'm good at complicated, Naruto grinned. And I'm definitely sticking around long enough to explore it properly. 1 month later, the Imperial Palace hosted an unprecedented gathering. Gods and mortals assembled together in the grand ceremonial hall to witness the formal recognition of new cosmic accords. Naruto stood beside Scáthach on the central dais, wearing formal attire that managed to incorporate both his original world styling and local ceremonial elements. His recovery had progressed steadily, strength returning along with finer control of his evolved eyes. Before them, representatives of all major factions waited attentively, divine courts, imperial government, spiritual orders, and common citizens selected by lottery to witness history. Tsukimi stepped forward, moonlight shimmering around his regal form. Today marks transformation in the relationship between realms, he announced, voice carrying effortlessly throughout the vast hall. The boundaries stand restored, yet with new understanding of their proper nature, not as walls of separation, but as membranes of distinction and controlled connection. Omoikane joined him, the wisdom god's ancient eyes twinkling with rare pleasure. Today we honor those whose actions preserve cosmic balance, and we establish new protocols to maintain harmony between divine and mortal spheres. The ceremony continued with formal recognition of all who had fought at Yomi Pass, special honors for the fallen, and the introduction of Kagetsuna as official liaison between imperial and divine authorities. When Naruto's turn came, he stepped forward somewhat awkwardly, still uncomfortable with formal recognition. Uzumaki Naruto, Tsukuyomi intoned. Bearer of the mystic eyes of death perception. Restorer of boundaries. The divine court's name Yuningen no Hashira, pillar of humanity, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. A celestial emblem materialized before Naruto, a stylized eye surrounded by interconnected circles representing the realms he had helped restore. It floated momentarily, then attached itself to his formal jacket, glowing briefly before settling into the fabric. Furthermore, Omoikane continued, we recognize your unique position as traveler between worlds. The controlled pathway you established shall be designated the Uzumaki Bridge, to be maintained and monitored by joint authority of divine courts and your personal oversight. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Such recognition of mortal authority over cosmic matters was unprecedented. Finally, Mizuhame stepped forward, completing the trinity of major gods. We acknowledge the Shadow Queen Scáthach as your partner in these duties, extending formal divine recognition to her realm as essential buffer between worlds rather than mere twilight exile. This announcement clearly surprised Scáthach herself. For centuries, the divine courts had treated the Shadow Lands as necessary anomaly at best, dangerous aberration at worst. Formal recognition elevated her domain to legitimate cosmic territory. The balanced cycle requires death, life, and the transitions between, Tsukuyomi concluded. All realms hold purpose in greater harmony. After the formal ceremony concluded, the gathering transitioned to celebration, another departure from tradition, as gods and mortals mingled freely in the palace gardens, sharing food, drink, and conversation that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Naruto found himself surrounded by well-wishers from all categories of existence. Imperial ministers sought his insights on governance, spiritual leaders requested training techniques for perceiving beyond normal reality, and ordinary citizens simply wanted to thank the strange yellow-haired foreigner who had helped save their world. You've become quite popular, observed Kagetsuna, appearing beside him with 2 cups of sake. The gods find it both amusing and alarming. Naruto accepted the offered drink gratefully. They're still not sure what to make of me, huh? You defy categorization, the Moon Champion replied with a slight smile. A mortal with power to affect immortals, neither fully of this world nor removed from it. Speaking of which, Naruto lowered his voice, any news about our thunder friend? Kagetsuna's expression grew serious. Takumi Kazuchi's judgment was rendered yesterday. His divine status is suspended for 1,000 years. He will live as mortal among mortals, serving those he once terrorized. Harsh, Naruto winced. But fair, I guess. Surprisingly, he accepted the sentence without protest, Kagetsuna added. Izanami's influence left him changed, humbled, perhaps, by how easily he was manipulated. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Scáthach, who had exchanged her usual combat attire for formal robes that somehow made her look even more dangerous. The divine courts request your presence in the East Garden, she informed Naruto. Apparently, there's been an energy fluctuation at the bridge terminus. Naruto's heart leapt. Kurama? Possibly, she acknowledged. The signature matches your description. Excusing themselves, they hurried to the secluded garden where Omoikane and Tsukuyomi already waited, monitoring a distortion in the air that rippled like heat waves over desert sand. Ah, Naruto-san, Omoikane greeted him. Your timing is excellent. The connection strengthens. The distortion pulsed, expanding briefly before contracting again. Familiar chakra brushed against Naruto's senses, unmistakably Kurama, but restrained, cautious. He's testing the boundary, Naruto realized. Smart fox. Focusing his evolved eyes, Naruto could perceive the bridge he'd created, a controlled pathway between worlds that remained stable but narrow. Kurama's energy probed it systematically, searching for safe passage. "Can you communicate with him?" Tsukuyomi asked. "I'll try." Naruto closed his eyes, reaching along the connection with his mind as he had in the Heart of Shadows weeks earlier. This time, the response came immediately, Kurama's distinctive presence, accompanied by overwhelming relief. "Kid! Finally found you." The fox's mental voice boomed in Naruto's consciousness. "Do you have any idea how hard you are to track across dimensional boundaries?" "Good to hear you too, Furball," Naruto replied silently, grinning despite himself. "Can you come through?" "Not fully," came the response. "The passage is too narrow for my complete essence. I could send a portion of my chakra, or possibly pull you back through, but neither without risk." Naruto considered the options. "Everyone back home okay?" "Worried about you, but fine otherwise. Sasuke's been particularly annoying about finding you, seems to think losing his rival would be inconvenient." That sounded like Sasuke, alright. "Tell them I'm okay." "Better than okay, actually." A pause in the mental connection. "You don't want immediate extraction, do you?" Kurama's perception, as always, cut straight to the heart of matters. "I've got responsibilities here now," Naruto explained. "And personal reasons to stay a while longer." An impression of vulpine amusement flowed through the link. "The shadow woman with the spear. I see her through your eyes. Interesting choice, kid. Can we maintain this connection?" Naruto asked. "Keep in touch while I'm here." "Now that I've found the correct frequency, yes," Kurama confirmed. "I can send chakra when needed and maintain communication. And when you're ready to return, you'll be my ride home," Naruto finished. "But not yet." "Understood." The fox's presence began to recede. "I'll inform the others. Try not to start any more cosmic disasters in the meantime." "No promises," Naruto replied cheekily before the connection faded to a background hum, present but not intrusive. Opening his eyes, he found the others watching him expectantly. "We've established stable communication," he reported. "Kurama can send chakra through if needed, and eventually help me travel back when the time comes." "A most satisfactory arrangement," Omoikane approved. "The bridge functions precisely as designed, permitting controlled communication without compromising boundary integrity." As the gods discussed the technical implications, Scáthach moved closer to Naruto. "Your path home is secured, then," she observed, her tone carefully neutral. "For the future," he clarified. "I'm not going anywhere yet." Her crimson eyes studied him. "How long is yet, Naruto? You have life and loved ones waiting in your world." "And I have both here too," he replied simply, taking her hand in public for the first time. Scáthach didn't pull away, though centuries of habitual reserve made her tense briefly before relaxing into the contact. "Immortals and mortals operate on different timescales," she reminded him softly. "Whatever exists between us faces that fundamental challenge." "Good thing I've got eyes that can see past surface limitations," Naruto grinned. "Besides, who says we have to follow the usual rules? I'm literally the bridge between worlds now." A reluctant smile touched her lips. "Your optimism remains your most formidable quality." "You forgot my charm and good looks," he quipped. "I excluded the imaginary ones," she returned smoothly, the banter coming more naturally now. Their exchange was interrupted by Mizuhame's arrival, the water goddess flowing into the garden in a cascade of mist that reformed into her humanoid shape. "Reports arrive from across the realm," she announced. "The restoration extends beyond our expectations. Regions long corrupted by thinned boundaries show signs of healing. The natural cycle reasserts itself everywhere." "The eyes fulfilled their purpose," Omoikane mused, glancing at Naruto. "Cosmic balance restored through appropriate correction rather than destruction." Speaking of the eyes, Naruto said, they're different now. More controlled. I can see death lines when I choose to, but they don't overwhelm me anymore. The evolution suggests a shift from emergency response to maintenance function, Omoikane theorized. As balance restores, the counterweight requires less extreme manifestation. The celebration continued into evening, lanterns illuminating the palace gardens as divine and mortal guests mingled more freely than ever recorded in imperial history. Naruto found himself drawn into conversations with beings from all realms, each curious about the strange foreigner who had changed their world's fundamental relationships. Later, as festivities wound down, he and Scáthach slipped away to a quiet corner of the imperial gardens. Above them, stars shone with renewed clarity, the cosmic boundaries now functioning as they should. So what happens now? Naruto asked, leaning against a flowering tree. I've got this fancy new title, you've got official recognition for your realm, and the gods are actually talking to regular people. Seems like everything worked out pretty well. Adjustment will take time, Scáthach cautioned. Centuries of separation between realms cannot be undone in weeks, despite formal ceremonies. But it's a start, he insisted. A real change. Yes, she acknowledged. A beginning worth pursuing. Naruto studied her in the moonlight, still struck by the contradiction she embodied, deadly warrior and isolated queen, ancient immortal and evolving being. Have you decided what you want now? He asked directly. Now that killing gods and saving the world is temporarily off the table. The question hung between them, addressing the fundamental shift in her existence. For centuries, Scáthach had been defined by isolation and unchanging purpose. Now both had transformed. I find myself, she began carefully, contemplating possibilities I had long abandoned. Connection. Purpose beyond mere existence. Perhaps even. She hesitated, the word clearly difficult, happiness. Scary concept. Naruto teased gently. Terrifying, she admitted with unexpected candor. More frightening than any battle. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Worth fighting for, though. Perhaps. Her crimson eyes held his, centuries of solitude warring with newfound possibility. What about you, Naruto? What does the bridge between worlds desire for himself? Right now. He drew her closer. Pretty simple, actually. I want to see where this goes. I want to help build something new between all these realms. And I want to be with someone who challenges me, fights alongside me, and makes immortality seem like it might not be such a lonely thing after all. Scáthach's expression softened into something few had ever witnessed, vulnerability and hope mingled together. Ambitious goals, as always. I've got good eyes, he grinned. I see possibilities others miss. As moonlight bathed the imperial gardens and stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the warrior queen of shadows and the bridge between worlds sealed their new beginning with a kiss, immortality and mortality finding balance in connection, just as the cosmos itself had found renewed harmony through their combined efforts. In the distance, divine figures nodded in approval, mortal celebrants continued their newfound communion with celestial beings, and somewhere beyond dimensional boundaries, a nine-tailed fox settled in to wait patiently for his friend's eventual return, whenever that might be. Balance, after all, was not about rigid separation, but about finding the proper relationship between all things. Death and life. Divine and mortal. Past and future. Connected yet distinct, like all the best things in existence. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.